Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
I was listening to one of the other podcasts, and I was actually driving my Honda Odyssey man van.
Today's guest is a multi-time national champion, having won STS in 2001 and FSP in 2007, and a Civic Si. Gotta like that. This interview covers a lot, so we're going to get right to it. Welcome to the show, Jason Tipple.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for the time. So talk to us. When did you get started in this autocross?
Actually, the Ohio State University Sports Car Club had an autocross club that ran on West Campus, and I drove by back, and I was working for a vintage race team at the time, and drove by and saw them running, and waited to the end of the day and did a couple front runs, and back in 1993. Next event, I had Coney Sports and coilovers and sway bars, so I kind of immersed myself pretty quickly.
Okay, so with this building, you just dropped a nugget probably, I didn't know. So you were doing what with a vintage club team?
I worked for a gentleman named Bob Ferguson. He owned what was now Midwestern Auto Group, but he was a vintage car race guy, and so I helped crew on. He had a 1957 pontoon fender Ferrari Testarossa, an old Maserati F1 car, and a Lotus 15. And so basically, I've been immersed in racing for probably the last, 23, 24 years, actually.
Okay, so you already knew, okay, unlike me who came in there having no clue from tires to springs, although I knew that, okay, my car has springs on it. You got it. You're like, okay, I need to put on sway bars. Shocks are very important. You already knew that from what you've been doing before.
Right, and when the first event that I did, I had lowering springs on the car already, and said, well, you're in street prepared. I'm like, well, what's the street prepared? So I got a rule book that they actually had, because the Ohio State Club kind of at that point worked in conjunction with the Ohio Valley region, and there was a bunch of the OVR guys were there, and I just bought a rule book, and I think, like I said, within a week or two, I just had a set of old HR lowering springs on my 86 Volkswagen Jetta GLI, and I had Coney Sports on it and new speed sway bars, and I just went full bore. So
that's neat to know. Whereas I probably, yes, I had to buy those paper rule books back in the day, but I guarantee you I wasn't opening them up to see what the heck's in here. I was so much of a lemming. I'm like, what do I do? Oh, David Felt had this car. David, what do I do? Okay, done.
So when did you start though?
2002, I think, or maybe I ran some local events in 2001. So I was in college back in 93, having no clue at Texas A&M that they actually raced there. So I'm still like, oh my goodness, how did I not hook into that club?
Yeah, that's the Spokes region, I believe, right?
I don't even know. I've never run an event down there or done anything. I just know, like, I heard afterwards, oh, yeah, autocross, College Station.
Yeah. Yeah. You were in the mecca of autocross and didn't even know it.
Exactly. What I knew is that they had, I think, 16 different basketball courts. So I was the nut who was in the gym until midnight. I wasn't out partying those first couple of years. I was playing basketball or volleyball like 3 or 4 hours a day.
Wow.
That was the addiction. I was like, oh, look, there are like 40,000 kids here, and a lot of them will sit here and play and skip class with me. Great.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, conversely, I was just immersed in race cars for forever, so it was just almost like a natural fit. My dad was a car guy, but and we would go to Mid Ohio, and so I've been around cars, and my dad was somewhat of a car nut, but I didn't start out in go-karting or anything like that. I mean, I first started basically when I was 20, 21 or 22, actually. So.
Yeah, still, and something you mentioned before we started recording was the talent pool, how deep it's gotten. Well, back when we were younger, the video games for racing cars were nothing like they are now. So I really think that has a lot to do. So if people listening haven't gone back and listened to, some of the people are phenomenal now. They've spent hours and hours and probably weeks and months of time on simulators driving racing cars at home, basically.
Oh, I know, and listening to the Pilata and Reynolds and O'Gorman, three aliens in their own right. And I started. I did some video game. Just like with the old, the old PlayStation. With the original Gran Turismo, it was fun, but I got so busy to the point where I was traveling all the time. It kind of went to the wayside. But I understand every aspect of it. Every car that I had on Gran Turismo had crazy camber and all that stuff. It's interesting because I don't remember if it was. I think Tom O'Gorman was saying something about how the way the programming is on them, you can really alter the way the cars handle as far as, it sounds like most of the new video games, you need to have like zero camber in the car, which in the real world doesn't work, but you almost have to like manipulate, the way the software is.
Yeah, I like to think that you have to experiment just like in real life to figure out what's going on. Although I should admit, I'm not the one experimenting. I'm the one going, well, I had Toyos and now I have newer tires, but I'm going to leave my camber the same. It seems to work pretty good. I just keep going.
Yeah.
So, tell us.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've got enough natural talent where you can kind of carry the car, too.
I don't know. I got to thank David Whitener again for letting me drive his at the Pro Finale this year because that car was amazing. I'm like, I need just to have David set up cars for me, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have a set of Whitener dampers on my SMF car now, too.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's amazing for what they are as far as actual cost. I've been on Koni 2812, and I had a set of motion control, double adjustable non-remotes, and then we went to the Whiteners. And the Whitener dampers, they just do everything well.
That you're pushing me over the edge here because I've been meaning to contact him now for probably about a month since I interviewed him, going, hey, what setup options do you have? And of course, because of like 2812s and such, I'm thinking, can you get me any adjustability? And if so, what's the price? But maybe you and he will convince me, hey, don't worry about that. Just off the shelf, or what he will valve them at is probably better than what I would configure anyway.
Right, that's the interesting thing, and I had a set of 2812s, and then when 2011, when I had a massive rod bearing failure, destroyed my turbo D16 motor out of my EK. I went to a K-Series motor, and when I did that, I decided just to change everything, and I had probably one of the best set of 2812s in the country. So as far as I was concerned, there were the shocks that I want on it. 2007 and SSD, and 2008, 2009. So they were well-developed shocks. Lee Grimes helped me out quite a bit, and so I decided to switch shocks, which was probably, obviously shooting myself in the foot because I've changed handling ever since then. But I also changed a lot of aero and everything else. So, the problem when you become to the point where you're kind of a tinkerer and a builder, it's not like I just make one change and go out and run the car. We don't have the comfort of being able to run year round like the West Coast guys. So
believe you me,
and even you guys, because you guys have a winter series. But then again, you're in the desert in Denver, basically. So.
Yeah, today was another freeze, but we've only had like one other light frost. So it was 77 degrees yesterday. So when we raced this past weekend, it was beautiful.
And back, when I started, like I said, in 93, when I started, 94 was basically, I sold the one jet I had, I bought another one, and, I started traveling with, it was the Fendip series, which is now Great Lakes Division, but that's dating me back to 94. I started traveling to divisional events in 94, so, I kind of immersed myself relatively quickly. I think it's a heyday back in I'd say probably early 2000s. We were doing probably 18 events a year.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So yeah, you were pretty serious event-wise for sure. What car came after the Volkswagen? When you first started, then what happened? What was next?
I bought it was a 1995 Ford Probe GT that we ran in, G-Stock at the time. And the car did very well. I mean, the car, basically it was the car to have back in it was either that or the Mazda MX-6, which was, in essence, the same car. But I did real well with that. I wanted to go to nationals, but I just didn't have the vacation time. But I think, I trophied at several national tours and did pretty well with the car. And then had an opportunity. I ran that in 95, 96, and then in 97, I actually bought Raleigh and Thelma Marine's then DSP 83 GTI until 2001. So I'm backtracking a little bit. After the G-Stock Probe, I built a Nissan NX 2000 for CST. Campaigned that locally and did some traditional stuff. But back then, the largest tire that you could run in a 14 or a 15 was a 225. And the car was outgunned in CST with the tires that we had, but it was a fun car. And then I bought Raleigh Thelma's CST Volkswagen GTI that we campaigned for quite a few years.
So that was front-wheel drive pretty much the whole time so far.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely campaigned in front-wheel drive basically until 2004 is when I got involved with a buddy of mine named Eric Stemler, who he was over in Peoria, Illinois, engineer at Caterpillar. And he and I kind of forged a good friendship where we started running his Mitsubishi Evo and ESP and had a blast. So that was definitely an eye-opening experience. Although I think the progression from front-wheel drive to all-wheel drive isn't that big of a stretch because all-wheel drive cars typically push anyway, and that's what front-wheel drive cars do. So I think that progression was somewhat easier to handle. The first time I drove the S2000 in VSP back in 2005 was eye-opening. I mean, the first day was terrible in nationals. The second day I got it together, but I was so far behind, there was nothing I could do. But S2000s are somewhat of a quirky car. I think the S2000 is a pretty phenomenal car, but they're difficult to drive at the limit.
Yes, one thing I've just heard, and I haven't tried this yet, of course I don't drive them very often, is removing the rear sway bar. That, when I rode with Jim Rienga, I could not believe what he got away with in his car, and then when I drove it, I was like, this is not an S2000, like, what did you do? And it was simply removing the rear sway bar.
And that's what when Jason Zaney and Julianne McCorney, like I said, we ran in 2005, we decided, I kind of went out to nationals and I didn't even have a ride. Like I said, Jason and Julianne and I have been good friends for a long time, and we decided, well, if we could run their stock class S2000 in VSP, I could run it on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Wednesday night we could put it back and they could run it in V-Stock Thursday, Friday. So we actually changed the ride height. We put through a set of 1,000-pound springs in the front, 800-pound springs in the rear. We disconnected the rear sway bar, and basically we put a set of Kumo, at that point were the V700s, I think, on the car and ran it in VSP, and then put it back and ran it in V-Stock, and they won, I think they were 1-2 at V-Stock, and then I think Annie and Julianne finished 1-2 at V-Stock ladies, if I recall. So, but the AP1 chassis is definitely a different beast compared to the AP2.
Yeah, that's what I'm more familiar with the AP1 as of driving them and not realizing the difference. Oh, so when you mentioned front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, to me, the biggest key that I can, at least going between the two when I made that switch, was when the car gets loose, you just add more throttle.
That's the
Right.
biggest thing I think that throws you when you get in these rural drive cars is like, no. That's now if you gun it, like I have a bad habit of doing, you're then out of control and spinning into timing lights, which I did once.
Which car was that in?
That was the FSP car, the 2002 model BMW that
Oh, okay.
the Yost have, that Valve won in, that it was Ian's car.
Oh, Ian's car. Yeah.
Who else? Wenzel won in. So, yeah, that car, it took me like, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes going, wait, I was at the finish lights pretty much, and then I spin and hit one. And I couldn't figure out, like, what went wrong here. And then finally it hit me. I'm like, oh, yeah, in the Civic, when I see that, I gun it. That didn't work, like, on a slight turn to just go flat out in the car.
Yeah. Ian's. I ran against the slimy green monster or whatever they called it. I can't recall. That was an interesting car because that car did very strange things. With that differential that it had. I mean, it clanked and banged around in grit, as I recall.
Oh yeah, because it's basically welded together.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like a bucket of bolts, but they were able to definitely hustle that car around. So.
It reminds me of a CSP Miata. Like, once it gets going, it just kind of keeps going.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a momentum car, I think. But when you talk about the CSP Miata, I still think from a pure standpoint, that is probably the most pure form of a street-prepared car. I think it's the ideal autocross car. So.
It's just phenomenal watching those guys go around in those. Scott Frazier, when I make it up to the West Coast Pro Solos, I'm just like, this is ridiculous. How could a Civic ever hope to compete against that? I'm like, the Civics are in the wrong class, I swear.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm kind of jumping forward a little bit. So in 2001 and 2002, running my STS Civic, in 2003, I decided to make the jump to CSP. And, on low grip, I think that's definitely an it's somewhat of an equalizer. Like in Toledo in 2003, I won the Toledo National Tour against Tim Arrow and like all of the heavy hitters in my car. But ironically enough, I peaked in June, and then by nationals on high grip level surfaces, we were just getting destroyed. So, but I think the EF, and it's kind of in a weird place right now. It's way too slow for CSP, and I mean, it's actually, I believe, an FSP car. I don't think it belongs in DSP. DSP needs to kind of be where honestly, kind of where the BMWs are now currently.
Yeah, I don't see it competing against those either. I can't imagine just from the power output those guys are getting.
No, I would agree, because I mean, I honestly think that DSP and ESP could almost be combined. The pony cars and the BMWs are all so close in time. I mean, they basically share fast time. So, but yeah, I mean, that's just the combination of, and I didn't spare any expenses when I built my EF for CSP. I mean, it had TWM individual throttle bodies, and at that point I had 13 by 9 3/4 wheels with the Hoosier stretched on it, and mini twin clutch, and I spared no expense, and I was fighting for 10th place at nationals.
Oh, yeah, and that's where just realizing when I was down 10 horsepower this past year, those two Pro Solos, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not competitive, and that's basically where you're at, even though you had tweaked everything out. It's
right.
Just disheartening.
And I think with STS now at this point and CSP, if you're not on the pointy end of the stick, you're done. I mean, unless you're lucky to get a dry run in a changing conditions event, it's like you're just not going to be able to compete.
And that's why everybody listening should realize that if you are 10th or something, I now realize if you're not in the right car or you're down on power, those things are huge. And then setup, it may be some setup stuff. I've been the goofball that shows up with an inch and a quarter toe in or toe out because I didn't check some alignment. All those things contribute mightily. Yes, you need tons of seat time and to know what you're doing. But as he said, if you're not at the pointy end of the stick, you really can't compete at the top level.
Right. But again, I also think that, there are some people who can compete with less than ideal cars. I mean, I don't disparage anybody from not traveling and not going to events just because, I've been on both ends of the spectrum in the last few years. Basically I took, in essence, I haven't been to nationals since 2009. So, I haven't been run many events, but, it's just amazing how deep the talent has gotten, which, I think helps everybody in the long run.
Oh, sure. And that's where I like through this podcast. You can hear what people have done to get better, how much seat time. We learned that David Whitener, who didn't know how to build anything, is now selling shocks. Like he valves them, sells them, revalves them at events and such. So, tell me on that. You're A-OK having no adjustability because now you basically have a autocross purpose designed or valved shock for your application.
And that to me is somebody who tinkers. It's interesting because I actually remember reading a sports car with Bob Tennell where he said at one point, he goes, he doesn't change the car after July. And I think he may have said, I haven't listened to the podcast with Tennell, but a lot of people don't change their car. I conversely change my car at every event. In 2007, I made a sway bar change in attic because I didn't like the way the car felt, so I changed the car. I'm not afraid to, to make a change at any event. The joy of having co-drivers, I usually, make them
the guinea pig driver.
The guinea pig, yeah. My buddy Nick, who's been my good buddy of mine, who we've been autocrossing now basically for the last 6 years. I'll make a change, but I won't tell him what change I'm going to make, and I can visually watch the car and see if it's going to work. And usually he ends up spinning backwards. I'm like, well, that's a little too much. But I like cars notoriously loose. But if he comes back and he's got white knuckle and he was able to save it, I know that was a good change. But yeah, speaking with Whitener's dampers, it's strange for me because I've had double adjustable shocks for years to go to a non-adjustable shock. It's a strange shock because it just does everything well. My car has had some inherent issues. I wanted to try and go against the grain. Everybody is running like an OS Geiken diff in pretty much all of the SMF Civics, but the differential that I had in my FSP car back in 2007, 8, 9 was a Quaife, and I had great luck with that, and there really wasn't a Geiken offering for the D series gearboxes at the time, so I had a Quaife. Well, it was phenomenal for that, so I put a custom-made Quaife in my current SMF car, and I've been fighting handling issues with the car, thinking it was dampers, thinking it was springs, and the differential just doesn't work. So that's the thing. When you tinker and you tweak and you make changes, and you're also a builder, you don't really know. Sometimes you don't know what changes you've made actually improve or hurt the car. So changing things all the time can be a great benefit, which I've benefited from, and it could also cost you a lot of events as well.
Yeah, because basically you're experimenting a bunch, but sometimes I guess you don't know the full results of the experiment probably because we don't get enough seat time.
Right, with the Civic of mine, I've tinkered with so much, and I've gone OCD on weight savings and, custom-made parts that, I've had weird ball joint issues, and I've had, strange custom-made exhaust system parts. So it's like I'm not even focusing on the car because I'm trying to, cobble together the exhaust system to get it through an event, which has plagued me for the last 2 years because I've just, I've tried to make exhaust systems that work with one hanger that weigh 3 pounds, and it just doesn't work. I'm like, well, lesson learned,
If you figure that out, I'd like one also, please.
just time and money.
So how did you know the Quaife differential wasn't working, or the diff you put in the car?
I'm good buddies with Brian Carwin, who owns Car Steps, and he's helped me out quite a bit on my Civic, and has helped me on the build as far as technical stuff, and we bounce ideas off of each other. And when I put the Quaife in, he and I talked. He said, I don't think it's going to work, but like I said, it had worked in my FSP car. So sometimes being bullheaded doesn't work either, and I think that's kind of what I found out. That I just the car does things amazingly well, but the car, again, it's like a lot of these cars. My car actually has a pretty decent aero setup with a pretty big splitter, and it's got some pretty interesting aspects of the front of the car where the car actually has functional downforce. You can feel it, but when you do that, it makes everything else change. So if you make a change to A, B, C, and D are affected by that. And now I'm to the point with, I've got 2 young kids, and, it's like, so I'm only doing 5 events a year. And these 5 events are, like the Wilmington National Tour and the Wilmington Pro and the Toledo Pro. So it's like, these are not like test sessions anymore. I'm at a national event trying to dial in a car. And like I said, with the competition being as fierce as it is, it's just not a good ideal time. So, that's what has cost me personally, as far as just trying to make, going against the grain and trying to make a massive change to a car, or, doing something different than everybody else.
All right, I've got to figure it out. We need to have you be a co-driver at these big events. That way somebody will just have the car set up and they tell you, you can't touch it. You just have to drive it.
It's a novel idea. A buddy of mine, Chad Freeman, has a top level. Actually, Brian Carwin built an S2000 for my buddy Chad, and it's an interesting car. Going from I've been basically a street prepared guy for the last close to 20 years, and go back to a street touring street tire class. But the STR car to me is a blast. It's nowhere near as fast as my SMF car, but it's still fun, and I never thought I would say that. I didn't think that, once you get used to Hoosiers and limited slip and, cars that have, crazy cornering speeds, and then you go back to a car that's, still has functioning air conditioning. And, it's like how the CD player works. Check that out. And then you get, then you run, my Civic, which, has close to 300 horsepower and, spits flames and, drags the ground everywhere. You switch back and forth, but, it's interesting, the change.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing was getting in the STR car. It felt big and heavy. And it was kind of like almost depressing. I'm like, wait, how am I supposed to be faster in this? And it just, I had the wrong mental mindset. And I was like, do I have to keep going smaller? Like, am I going to be this disappointed in bigger cars? I found out I'm not, but it was kind of a shock at how my Civic felt almost just as quick because it's like 700 pounds lighter.
Right. And learning that, and that's kind of where I got so OCD on weight savings, because at the end of the day, you cannot outrun weight. You just can't do it. So, that's one of those things where I still think that the EF is, I think the EF Civic and the Mazda Miata are probably 2 of the purest autocross cars out there, because you don't have to spend a ton of money to build an EF. There have been so many that have been built. You can buy one used, or you can build one, and you don't have to go completely insane to build one of those cars.
Yeah, Ron Williams, when he won a couple years ago, he had the cheap header, and I think maybe he had double adjustable Coney shocks. What I can tell people is make sure your power's there, get a decent setup in the range that you like to drive it, and you should be competitive, or you could be.
Right. Yeah, and I think any fresh build OEM motor with, if you're within 5 horsepower in ST, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, who's gonna build that for me? Mine's still sitting here, not taken apart yet. Oh.
I know a guy, but he's not cheap. So.
Oh, so yeah. Well, while we're speaking, so everybody can hear this, is $3,000 to redo one top and bottom? Is that high, low, in the middle?
That's probably in the middle. I mean, I've had good luck with an engine builder up in Toledo, Ohio, a company named Pure Tuning. Aaron Byram and I have been friends for years, and he's built some phenomenal motors. He's not inexpensive, but it's one of those. I don't remember what the saying is, or I may be messing up the saying, but it's like you can have fast, cheap, and reliable, but you can only pick two.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, I think a proper engine build for an ST car. I mean, you're going to spend $3,000 to $5,000 realistically.
Do you have any?
Which is ironic.
Yeah, because the car doesn't cost that much. Do you think a leak down test? Once you do that, what numbers would you expect?
Well, I mean, as I recall, I think 170 to 190 if it's across the board. But usually with EFs, they usually end up dropping one cylinder at a really weird, one cylinder is always like way lower than the other. I don't know if that's an intake runner length issue or what, but I mean, what have you noticed with yours?
Well,
now, granted, you're at elevation.
Yeah,
so your calibrations are way different. So.
Yeah, I was trying to do a leak down test, and James Darden told me to just bring the car in, so I borrowed his nice snap-on thing, and one of mine said like a leak down wise, not compression, leak down of like 8% loss. And what I've read is people are like, oh, it's fine, it's under 10. But I was like, I think if you have a fresh built good motor, it's going to be down 5 and below. I just don't really know. So I keep asking people, hey, what should somebody expect?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on, the tune too. I mean, there's so much in tuning. And again, with the development.
Yes, I can second that. I still don't have a running Mega Squirt, but when I borrowed one, it was amazing what I got out of that. So supposedly 2 people are trying to build me 2 different ECUs now. And that's something just recently James Darden's like, just bring the car over, which I should have done to begin with because me trying to do a leak down. He goes, I think it's an ECU. I don't think it's a problem with your engine. So it's going to be very interesting to go back through the valve lashing settings or what have you. And also, maybe it simply is tuning. And I've known other ECUs to have gone bad. So maybe that's something where the top of my car, I just have no power up top. So.
But yeah, because I mean, back in 2000, in 2001 or 2002, I actually ran a Mugen ECU that didn't even have a red line, which was always interesting. And then we ran a Z-Dyne Gold. That's dating me, obviously.
Well, that's what I have though. I have that. I have Tim Smith's Z-Dyne in the car. I don't have a cable to tune it, so I've never retuned it, but.
Oh, really? Yeah, and that's very similar. The Z-Dyne is basically like the grandfather to the Honda S100. So, I mean, if you can get somebody who can tune a Honda system, they can tune that Z-Dyne.
And that's where I always wanted to go back at the very least, although I can't even find stuff on the internet to even make a cable to connect to it anymore. Was at the very least I could look at what we had set in the Mega Squirt and see if I could just approximate that back to the Z-Dyne. That would probably be as close as I could get to the power I was getting.
Right, and the one thing that I wasn't pleased with the Z-Dyne is I think the table's maxed out at 7,400. If I recall.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and now granted, I mean, any legal EF motor is going to fall flat on its face at 6,800 RPM anyway. But when I kept that Z-Dyne in my car when we went to CSP, and we found out very quickly that the limiting factors on that, once you put 40 over pistons and individual throttle bodies, it's like you need that table up top. So.
Oh, because you could actually run. You were able to run higher and higher. Yeah, mine, just for everybody if they dare have an EF, over 5,100 RPMs is where all of a sudden it just stopped making power. Whereas in the past, it went up about 10 more. So it just, some reason. Of course, hearing, I don't know what you've done to chime in on this. The guys in Texas said they do the rings every 2 years. And I think reading Andy Hollis's write-up, exhaust valves can burn and go bad. So,
intake and exhaust valves really, and the valve guys really get the snot beat out of them when you turn over, basically over 7,500 RPM and any D series, they just get the they just get the snot wrung out of them. So, I think if anything, the cylinder head, I think, is where the key to the power is in the ST cars. Not so much the bottom end. I think as long as the rod bearings are okay, you don't have any score marks on the cylinder walls. The compression is, honestly, it's 9-7 to 1. It's not, I think inconsistency in fuel or tune will do more damage to the valve, or will do more damage to the piston ring than anything else.
Huh, okay. I'm going to bring back a thought you were talking about changing cars. So the times I've actually changed a car, like at Nationals, was if you can't beat them, join them. It was a time whenever I had beaten Jason Frank somewhere and Jeff Wong somewhere, and I showed up at Nationals Pro Solo Finale, and they were like a second ahead of me, and I never got close. That's when all the super amounts of negative camber. So in grid, the second day of Nationals, we adjusted my camber to whatever the max was, like 4.2 negative. And all of a sudden, I was competitive again. So that's one thing I can tell people. If you're not competitive and you look around grid and you're noticing everybody else has tons of camber or something different that you know about, go ahead and try it, because at some points people are evolving things in these different classes, and you kind of have to be there with them.
Right. Yeah. I recall walking through grid at it was at a pro or a tour here over in Ohio. I saw that's when the Toyos were king in ST, and I looked at all the Civics and they looked like they were broken. They had 5 degrees negative camber, which you're actually making. I think it's somewhat the Band-Aid, because that's the only way you could get those tires to work, was to run massive amounts of camber in them. But sometimes you just. That's kind of actually where I got to the point with the Whitener dampers. I was having some problems with the shocks I had, and then I ended up switching to the Whitener dampers because Brian and Don Poole with that supercharged CRX. They were on the Whitener dampers. I'm like, well, sometimes you just got to join them. That's kind of where I got to the point where, I had spent so much money on the car, and I was unhappy with the shocks that I had. Switching to the Whitener dampers, they just worked. So
I will probably be for sure talking to him just to see what options are out there for sure, because it was a pleasure to drive his car, and even though it was on the tires I didn't think I liked, with his setup and whatever settings he had, spring wise, everything else, it was phenomenal.
Right, and you've done some BF Goodrich testing as well, or have you? Because you've been running the Bridgestones, right? It certainly sounds like the tires are very dependent on car kind of a thing.
Yeah, so I own both and have driven both, but I like the Bridgestones. I say it's a sharpness thing. Of course, once again, I don't change my setup. It's still basically the same Toyo setup, so I've got lots of camber. But when I went out to Nationals and I was co-driving at the finale this year, I was basically begging, saying, hey, I'll use my Bridgestones to save your rivals. No. First runs out, phenomenal. So once again, with the shocks, the setup, the power of his car, phenomenal.
Yeah, it's interesting. I watched David run in his RSX, and that's definitely an interesting thing. Oh, and ironically enough, I built an EP3 for STS back in 2004, and at that point, it was way outgunned in STS. But David definitely stepped it up with the development of his shocks on that car. The RSX and the EP3 Civic are definitely, they are very ride height sensitive. And David's car looks like it's underground. It's so low. But part of that's the 15-inch tires, too. But, sometimes you got to put a Band-Aid on it. And I think with a lot of these, with the BF Goodrich tires, I think you can actually you're making the sidewall part of the suspension.
Yeah, somebody else was mentioning that you need to adjust your springs because now you're going to use that softer sidewall.
Right. And BF Goodriches have always been, to me, I ran the old BF Goodrich R1 back in the DSP days. They had amazing grip, but they really felt numb. The turn-in was very vague. The grip was always there, but I was, I'm a Hoosier guy, where the car is going to be with a Hoosier compared to a BF Goodrich. You're just like, well, I hope it sticks. Kind of, it's doing what it's supposed to, but the vagueness can be somewhat of a turn on too. I mean, I think because Yam won STR on the BFGs.
Yes, he did. And once again, you just nailed why I like the Bridgestones. They were so crisp. They were very much like a Hoosier. Of course, it had been several years since I'd been on Hoosiers consistently, but that's what I thought. But once again, driving David's car, it was much better. I wasn't complaining about the stuff I was complaining about when I put on the Rival S's on my Civic. So that kind of went out the door of it's vague. It wasn't nearly as vague. Now, so that was helpful. Whatever he did, plus I guess I've thrown one caveat and let you go with that thought, was I was driving a GT3 up until the day I hopped back in the Civic. So I went from no weight in the front to, okay, I'm familiar with this again. I have some weight. So that might be throwing me off too. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, because I wanted to ask you about the GT3 because I think that the GT3 is exactly like a Civic except backwards. And that those cars are very pendulum based. I mean, they definitely wherever the nose is pointed, which is ironic because at the end of the day, I think front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, as long as they're set up properly, they all they're almost predictable to me. I mean, I think a lot of people have difficulty switching from car to car. I've never had a problem with that. I can get in pretty much any car as long as it doesn't push, and that's something that I've tried to work on, trying to drive around the push, which, like I said, I cannot stand cars with push. I can't make them work.
Well, in the GT3, the crazy thing I brought was the wrong assumptions, but the biggest thing was in a Civic, I get mid-turn and I power out. In the GT3, if you get mid-turn and you punch it, you just push. Like, terrible, because more of the weight's coming off the nose.
Right.
So that it's just weird. This last event, being a winter series, not counting, I finally was able to move my left foot off of the brake and to the side. Now, it always takes at least one brake zone to remember that. But I was probably more competitive than I've been lately in that car. And I think I'm going to try to not left foot brake in the Civic. I'm not sure I can pull it off. But at least in that car, having a little bit of time between braking and accelerating, I think helps load the nose just a little bit to help something that's rear engine actually get some weight up front to give you some kind of grip turn in.
Right. And that's one thing that, I mean, I'm a massive left foot braker. And I think it's actually, the only time I think left foot braking doesn't work is when you overdrive the brakes, or like on newer cars with ABS systems, you can slip into ice mode really quick. So, I mean, but it's interesting. I mean, I know that when Eric Stemler and I drove together, he was not a left foot braker, but he was a turbo guy, which was almost counterproductive. So, I mean, it's like most, I know that when you ran your Audi, you were a left foot braker because of the boost.
Yeah.
But Eric he had a DSM Talon that he ran in the ESP for years before that, built the Evo. And this was kind of before data acquisition. But Eric and I, we ran completely different lines. I left foot braked. He didn't. He right foot braked, and yet our times were within thousandths of a second.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, and we drove different lines, and it's just amazing. But I also think, depending on who's in your car, they will push you to different levels of competition. Back in, like I said, the early 2000s, we did a bunch of testing. Marcus Meredith and like the Indy region, they would go over to Grissom, and we would do tests early in the year. And you get 20 or 30 people out there, and then you could run all weekend. We'd go through 3 or 4 sets of Hoosiers out there just to test, and you get complacent too. You go out and make a couple runs. You're like, okay, the car's good, and then somebody else would hop in the car and just smoke you by a second, and then you're like, oh, okay. So you would trade times back and forth. But I think with the competition, the level has gotten so high for everybody. It's just you can't just build a car and leave it alone anymore. I think you have to tweak, you have to tune, you have to test. I mean, in 2001, when I won nationals, in 2000. I got eighth in FSP in my GTI, and I campaigned my FSP car all the way up to nationals. Actually, both of the cars I had, my GTI and my STS Civic, were in the garage, and literally I just loaded up the Civic instead of the FSP car to go to nationals. And I hadn't actually driven the STS Civic for probably 3 months. So when I won that, well, now granted, 2001 was such a cluster with 9/11 happening, but so it was a one-day event. But I hadn't driven the car. My one of my buddies was driving it with my then girlfriend at the time, and they drove it at locals and divisionals, and I drove my FSP car. So I hadn't driven the car since like June, and I hopped in it and ran, the Pro Solo finale and finished, I think second, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. It's kind of, if you don't win, you don't really remember all of the finishing results. And then I won in 2001. But I think those days, but then again, people like David Faust can not run, or John Thomas can run one event a year, and it happens to be nationals. I mean, I think there are a few like Tom O'Gorman, I guess, too. But for the most part, for the other 99% of us, you have to you have to run, and you have to test and develop.
Yeah, getting that seat time. You just hit on something very interesting. When I go to the BMW events here, you get 4 or 5 runs in the morning and 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I have left at midday before because I'm just kind of like, all right, I figured it out. Or I'd be slower in the afternoon. Whereas what you were saying, if you had a whole bunch of people driving the same car, or let's say the same spec type car, that reminds me of the indoor go-karting I used to do. I would drive around, and every single lap I'd see my lap time, and I'd see who else was above or behind me. That's huge. And as I keep saying I'm going to do, and we're going to pull off some of these test days, I found when I went out there with Ian one time, he wasn't driving, it was just me and my Civic. I got so bored so quickly. So I'm thinking you got to have people there, and if you can get them in and out of your car and find somebody that can beat you or do something better than you, have some clocks up there, have some data, probably clocks as much as anything. That's huge to keep you motivated.
Oh, absolutely. Because when Eric and I were driving that Evo, we, my wife was driving. Well, she drove the car a little bit, and but she hadn't driven. And Eric and I were running I can't even remember the time, but we were within a tenth of a second of each other. And Kristen got in the car, and she was running, and she was within a tenth of a second of us. And she was a good driver, but I mean, sometimes that's the push it takes. And then Eric and I got back in the car and dropped 3/4 of a second.
You just knew there was more out there, or at least you believed there was more time there, and you found it.
Right, and I think that was actually the first time we had data acquisition, and we had a DL1 setup. And there were sections where she was 3 miles an hour faster than us. There are sections, and that's the amazing thing to me now with data acquisition. We've got a Solo Storm that we've been messing with a little bit in the SMF car. I mean, there are sections where that to me is the amazing thing, because you can visually look at something, or you can take a look at the data, and there are sections where, like as an example, Nick, my co-driver, he'll be 4 miles an hour faster going into a corner, but I'll be 6 miles an hour faster than him coming out of the corner. So that's just to me, it's just amazing, because and I'm not a data guy, because it's like we haven't really been around it that much. I mean, which is ironic, because Eric is he's an engineer, but he doesn't use data, which is very strange.
Yeah, and I can tell you, this stuff's huge. And one thing for all you guys using Solo Storm, I realized that evidently at the beginning, they did not have the sections. They can put sections in there. I came from the TrackMate world where everything would break down into sections, and I would set them where I wanted them. As you were saying, you could be 4 miles an hour faster or slower in and out. What's amazing is you can move half a second between two sections, or if you break the course up into entry and exit. Because of line choice and braking, you can move time around. So I was pointing out to somebody this year, I'm like, no, let's put sections up here and look at the sections and say, look, okay, you beat me here, but I beat you here. What's a delta? That's in autocross, because there's so much going on, and if you blow one turn,
you might come into the next one way too hot or slower, but then you come out faster. So I would definitely tell people, if you have Solo Storm and you've never turned it on, turn on the sections. That way you can see per section faster or slower. That'll be huge.
One of the key things that I've been able to do with my car is, I mean, I've had a lot of help from an engineering standpoint from a couple of the guys who worked on Rahaal's team. Chris Yancher is a buddy of mine he actually works for Joe Gibbs Racing. He does all the R&D stuff now for the NASCAR side. But you know, the technical information that you can get, you know, we've got a spreadsheet for my car, you know, but data only works if you know how to use it.
Yep.
You know, sometimes I think if you look at the data and go, oh, I need to make a change, I'm like, well, do you understand? Data is learned, or, you know, it's a taught thing and a learned thing too. I mean, you have to, you know, anybody can look at a sector time, but it's like, well, if you don't know, you know, well, where was the placement on the car, you know? And conversely, I think, you know, Solo is such an anomaly because every course is different, and you only get typically 3 or 4 runs at it. So you're literally throwing a qualifying lap every single time. You know, it's like, well, maybe the car wasn't doing this. I'm like, well, maybe the tires weren't up to temp. You know, maybe when you did 3 or 4 course walks, you know, first runs typically are a throwaway. That's why having a co-driver, depending, I think, on the class or the, you know, if you're in street touring, or, I mean, sometimes first run out is ideal, depending on temperature and tire choice and everything else. But I think having a co-driver definitely co-drivers definitely help you learn your car. And actually, I think co-drivers, to me, help you learn more about yourself than anything else.
I would say, especially if you're looking at data, and then you said something that made me think of Ron Williams. He would stand there and watch the cars on course, whereas I'm usually no telling what I'm doing. He's like, you never pay attention. I'm like, you're right. I said, I look at the course to see if there's a big issue where people are having the same mistake, to see if that's something I was going to notice. But I bet you, with the co-drivers, you're probably also gaining information by talking to them. Is it tight? Is it loose? Like when you said you were making those changes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very cognizant of, you know, competitors within my class or cars that are very similar to mine as far as chassis, you know, configuration or whatnot. But having a co-driver and having them run first, to me, helps me immensely because, I mean, you know, like I said, I've been autocrossing for so long, and I've gotten to the point where I'm terrible on course walks. I'll walk it 2 or 3 times, and I'm usually a social butterfly chatting the whole time. So, I mean, there have been times where I've gotten in the car, pulled up to the starting line, and like, I hope you know you're going by. Let's wing it here because I wasn't really paying attention. So,
do you get amped up when you pull up there like that? Do you get a little butterfly action?
It depends on the event, but I mean, at locals I have a lot of fun. At locals I typically will only walk the course once if somebody, you know, if my buddy Chad or Nick wants to walk it, but I don't like to walk courses at non-national events. So to me, it helps me because you've got to pay attention. You've got to look ahead.
Yeah, and maybe you might have just made me realize maybe I look ahead better just because of the anxiety I feel of not knowing, or I start saying, where am I going? Where am I going? Do I really know where I'm going? You better look ahead. Maybe I can just walk a bunch and try that same mental attitude and figure out how to get the anxiety a little bit going, because I seem to thrive in the don't walk the course a bunch. For sure, don't memorize it to the point of I'm going to break here or break there. That's not my MO. And then you said something that perplexes me because I'm the opposite. I have led D-Stock after day 1 for my first run. And there is nothing more maddening than doing that. Because it's like, how can I not improve with 3 runs when it's a qualifying thing? And in this case, I can remember I kept making the same mistake every time at the beginning of the course.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't really, I'm going off of recent memory. The last 2 years have been kind of a hodgepodge of calamities. But I would say, I would agree, because there have been, like 2006, 7, 8, 9, there were times where my first run, or I would make 3 runs and they were within a thousandth of a second. And I would make, you know, different, entry points, different braking points. I'm like, and I think a lot of it with, listening to the different, people you've had on your podcast. The longer you've autocrossed, maybe the less time you need to walk course, but sometimes the older I get, the more I realize I actually need to kind of get back to the basics of beginning course walks again and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Like hey, that used to be good for me. I can tell people used to, I'd show up, not so much hungover, but with 4 hours or 5 hours of sleep, and I do phenomenal. And Mary Medicus would be like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, well, probably I can't over-focus is what I really give credit to like that. I couldn't psych myself out. I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm here. I walk course. All right, it's time to go drive. And there's no mental game going against me or working against me. It's all for me. And I think what you're pointing out is the walking the course or what have you, or like David Fouth, if you can just do what you know how to do and always get yourself, let's say, in that mindset, I don't see him as someone that goes out and pushes too hard, where I still do that at times. And it's the whole mental game of, I got to go a little bit faster here. I try to tell myself there's never a hero run anymore. Never. I don't even want to let myself think that thought. It's like, no, I have to go out, and if there's something I can correct, otherwise just drive again. And of all weird things now, I will tell myself to brake sooner. And honestly, after all these podcasts I've been listening to, I keep hearing from the Brian Peters and Tom O'Gormans and James Yams, they want the entry to be slower. If anything, they're really only focused on exiting. So I tried that this last weekend with the right foot braking only. It seemed decently successful.
And I think a lot of that, it would be interesting to get somebody like Jeff Kiesel to call in, because I think, the distance versus speed versus, I think a lot of that is very dependent on what you're driving. I think if you ask Tom that when he was driving the FP 914, it's like you could actually probably go a little bit wider because your corners, if you're going 5 miles an hour faster around the corner instead of pinching it off, you're going to be going 5 miles an hour faster. So taking maybe a wider line in some sections, depending on what car you're in, actually does benefit.
And that's what's so crazy. So an FP versus CSP, and I'm thinking back to Julian Garfield, he was saying he basically, I'm not forgetting now, but he didn't want to change his line so much, but from in the go-karts with the small power range, they would definitely increase the line or distance to stay in the power range, which I think could come into play, like you're saying, FP versus Kiesel versus a Civic.
Right. I think, because, like with a car like Kiesel's car, the car weighs nothing, and it's got, that car is basically a drag car. If you've ever watched any of his in-car video.
Yes, I have.
You don't and that's it's almost like a video game because you have no concept, and Jeff's very deliberate about not putting a speed on those things, but he doesn't put the traces on. But you have no concept of speed. And, I've had a lot of ST guys talk to me about my car. It's like, well, I think it's doing this and it's doing that. Well, why aren't you doing this? I'm like, until you actually drive somebody else's car, you don't really know what it's doing. I think it's always easy for somebody to say, well, you should try this. I'm like, well, have you driven the car? Well, no. Well, maybe it doesn't do that.
Oh, and that brings back something you said. So you're a left foot braker, and you mentioned you love cars really loose. Well, I used to think I loved that, and now I don't think my cars are loose. But once you throw the left foot braking in there, all of a sudden a loose Civic is no longer loose in my mind because I can just drag or I can just touch just a little bit and it's not loose. Do you find that, or have you noticed that between right foot brakers in your car?
Well, Nick left foot brakes, and most of the people have when Eric drove my Civic when we were running it in Street Mod back in 2004 and 2005. He was a right foot breaker, and he would, like, every run he spun. First run he would spin because because the rear tires weren't up to temperature. But with left foot braking, you're able to actually force the weight transfer. Basically, you're sucking the car down as far as when even through a slalom. And I don't know if you've watched any of my videos, which I haven't posted too many, but for my car, I'm on the brake, on the throttle. My car sounds, like Jason Frank and other people have said, it sounds like there's something wrong with my car because I'm very on off with the throttle, but I'm on the brakes the whole time, because to me, I can set the car, with cars with limited slips that are front wheel drive, if you go too fast into a corner, you could left foot brake and actually change the pitch of the car and actually get back on the throttle. So I can make 2 or 3 corrections in a slalom with the throttle and the brake to get the car to go where it needs to be. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the fastest way, because at that point I wasn't really running any data, but it's able to get, manipulate the car through a slalom faster with left foot braking in a front wheel drive car, at least.
Well, what you said about the car sucking down was exactly what I think of, and it goes back to the D-stock days for me in the Integra. I would be in something like a high-speed slalom and just touch the brakes if it seemed loose, and the car would just tighten up and come down, it felt like. Maybe because the rear tires are biting more than the front, especially because I bet I was still accelerating at times. So it seemed like such a good thing, but here's my whole debate of why I'm trying to right-foot brake, is I don't naturally have a lift and a left foot brake. I'm either gassing and braking or braking only, but I don't differentiate. There's never a pause between the left foot actuating and the right foot coming up.
Well, yeah, that was an interesting thing, because I was listening to one of the other podcasts, and I was actually driving my Honda Odyssey man van, I like to say, and I tried to left foot brake on the street. And I can't do it. I used to do it all the time, but I'm terrible left foot braking on the street. But I'm good right foot, good left foot braking on autocross. But I can't right foot brake on autocross. Again, like I said, I've been autocrossing for 20 years, so it's almost like a bad habit. Once you kind of get into that, and I've tried to right foot brake, but when the car is kind of loose, and the first time you right foot brake the car and it tries to go out on you at 70 miles an hour, you slip back into the old habit real quick. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work.
Oh, and that's one thing I bet. So those of us in front wheel drive cars, if they're somewhat loose, like you're saying, if you go to input and you are not left foot braking and you have that pause, basically, I think when you're right foot braking, I'm guessing now, you have to start that sooner. Otherwise, the car is going to want to go around, which is why we think we have to left foot brake.
In regards to left foot braking and a lot of it I think bases off of, I've been running in street prepared for so long. The way left foot braking works to me with the differential and race tires is different than what it would be on a street tire. I think that the differential is a lot more forgiving with brake inputs for cars that have higher spring rates and whatnot. So it's like the left foot braking on a car that's stiffly sprung doesn't affect weight transfer as much. So it's actually a more subtle way of controlling the car on slip angle on different sections of a corner.
Because lifting with a stiffer isn't transferring as much weight because it's so stiff.
Correct. Yeah, and all of my cars have generally been, Sam Strano gives me guff all the time because I run crazy spring rates, but it works for me. And I've tried softer spring rates, and I don't like the way the car feels. And I've done back-to-back testing with lower spring rates and larger spring rates, and consistently I've been faster. Although it may be a mental thing too, because I don't like body roll. And anytime the car I have body roll, I get a little nervous. I drove Billy Brooks had an STS Subaru that I'm sure you remember that 4-door 2.5 RS.
Yeah.
And I drove that car, and that car, it was a very well prepped car, but it was very softly sprung, and I couldn't drive it. I was absolutely terrible in it, and I drove it I think I drove it at Toledo at one of the pros, and then I gave it back to him, which was very generous of him to let me use it. And I was back of the pack, and the next weekend he won in it. But some people are able just to, Billy's definitely, he's a stud. He's one of those. When he drove Greg McCance's car and won an ESP that year, he hadn't driven the car in a year. But
yeah, I think he won. I think he won in the Civic that I have from Tim. Yeah,
I think so. So, but that's just one of those things where, I mean, I'm not good in cars that, have body roll.
Yeah, and it may be that you just don't love it, or it freaks you out, or that extra time
Right.
it takes for the car to set. Something about that, you're just not familiar with it anymore.
Well, and again, it's like from my standpoint, it's like I started basically in a street prepared car, so I've always had cars that have been stiff.
Oh.
So that's the only thing I've ever known. All of my street cars are lowered anyway, or it's like my van's on H&Rs. My van has an aggressive alignment, so I mean everything I drive is stiff.
Otherwise, you think you're in the minivan. You're like, this isn't right. Oh, I gotta pick on a local guy without saying too much. Mark has an STU car, and I hopped in it for one run, switched out with the GT3, I don't know, a couple months ago. And I couldn't believe how soft it was. Like, from the GT3, you can push a button to make the shocks tighter. I couldn't believe an ST that there could be an ST car that had roll. So I keep picking on him a little bit like, hey, why your car's so soft? I'm like, it was okay, but it was so crazy. It was almost back to like Integra days. I'm like, oh yeah, I turned and it started leaning and then it set. I've been, I guess, in cars stiffer now for so long that I was like, wow, this really does take a little time to set.
And that's just it's a comfort level too. I mean, if you're comfortable with, and that's the thing. It's like you really I don't think anybody should think ill of somebody's chassis setup if it works for them. There are some cars that are, I've driven that like I said, I drove Billy Brooks's car and I couldn't make it fast, but it was fast.
Oh, that's the thing is I'm picking at him only because I was surprised that an ST. But your point is obviously can be so correct. For certain chassis, you might want that, like an S2000. Maybe some of you will take the rear sway bar off and be faster because you can handle that more, especially in an AP1.
Yeah, the AP1 is a difficult. I mean, they're very knife edge. The AP2, I don't know how much the suspension geometry is a little bit different in the rear, but also that gearbox helps, and the car has quite a bit more torque. So I think the AP2 chassis is definitely, although I think it may, like I said, it may have to do more with the 2.2 liter and the different gearbox too.
Yeah, something together. I keep hearing that, and it pains me because I have the AP1, but I don't know. I'm glad James Jom said, no, take it and just go drive and learn how to drive that car. Don't go BSP or something crazy. Like, don't even do that. So I like his thoughts there. I'm going to bring you back to the left foot, right foot braking. What I realized is it was really hard for me to, one, mentally remember, hey, you want to take your foot off after your shift. But luckily, once I did it and I planted that foot to the left, it was back to, okay, I know how to right foot brake because I do it most days on the street. So I will challenge you, not that you need to do it, but if you can get your foot off of the brake, all of a sudden it almost rewires your brain that then it's normal again.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, the interesting thing is, and I guess now that I think about that, there are sections of courses where I do right foot brake. So I'm almost inconsistent. I left foot brake through sweeper or through slaloms, but not really through sweepers.
And I bet sometimes or most times you don't even know what you're doing. I've had to ask myself, did I just left foot brake or right foot brake? Although I'm almost always left, but you probably don't even realize, once again, 20-something years autocrossing, you just kind of do what you do.
Right. And I think a lot of it depends on the car you're in. When Travis Roebuck, ST guy, yeah, we built, I built a 92 Civic for Street Mod, or SMF rather, and I built it, and then I had to sell the car. We found out I was having my son Ryan, so I panicked and bailed on that car and sold it to a buddy of mine who actually left it in his garage for 3 years, and then Travis bought the car. And then we built it into an SMF car. And he was an STS guy, and he was used to, being 2 inches off the cone and everything else. And what I told him is, I said, the reality is, once you get to the point where you're with a limited slip and you have doubled the horsepower, you're not going to be, on the leading edge of cones and everything else. And he didn't believe me until we built the car and we went out to our first national event, and he got out of the car after his first run. He goes, I don't even know where we were on course. I said, yeah, because when the car's so much faster, I'm like, did I miss the gate? I don't even know because the cornering speeds are so much higher. Because as good as the STS Civic is, when you put slicks on it and you put a limited slip, and you increase the horsepower by 20 to 60%, things happen so much faster. It's hard to really focus on, I need to be, at this section of a corner, because I'm like, you're just trying to get through it.
Yeah, the precision goes out. So here's exactly what I thought of when you were talking about that. Have you been in an EP Civic with power steering?
I built an EP Civic with power steering, and it's an interesting car. It's a great car to run. I mean, I built my EK chassis for it was the national winning FSP car. I gutted the car and built it for E Prepared, and then ended up selling the car afterwards. But so we really never ran it that much. But I ran it at 2 or 3 events. And in the power steering with high horsepower and losing 350 pounds out of the car, it was unbelievable. The cornering speeds.
So I did that at Spring Nats, and what you're saying is so true. Like, I was trying to be precise, but it would just go. Like, I would say, go over there, and I would accelerate, and it would just do it. I think it had Avons and or Hoosiers. I forget. They were switching between which ones were on the front versus back. I was like, how much do I have to pay for one of these? I was like, can I just write a check, and can you just deliver me one of these? Because it was phenomenal how it just kind of went wherever you wanted to go.
What car did you drive? Delay?
Yeah, Delay's car. Yeah, that.
And Washburn's? Yeah, that car's... So my 2002 STS car, I built into CSP, and then it became a street mod car, and then I sold it to Robert Christmas, who is actually currently campaigning it in E Prepared. So Robert Christmas has my old EP car. Now, that car still has manual steering, although that car actually has the Quaife quick ratio rack in it. And for an ST guy, the steering ratio on the Civics are so slow, and when you put the Quaife rack in it, it changes it almost cuts the steering input in half.
Oh, nice.
So, it's unbelievable. I mean, we retrofitted on the EK chassis on my SMF car. It's got an Integra Type R power steering rack, so what the steering ratio is like that on the Integra Type R. It's 2.6 turns lock to lock.
I had the big wheel in my car, so that's why I still shuffle steer.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too, because I've got electric power steering in my car now, so it's weird because I can't really tell the difference in the car, but my co-driver half the time would drive it without the power steering on, and he loved the way it felt. He thought it felt very precise, whereas I hated driving it without the power assist. So, he liked the crispness of it. I liked the ease of actually being able to turn the wheel without...
sorry, you're making me think that in FSP, the Sprint, that was my biggest complaint, is like, I can't turn this wheel. I can't, I can turn it, but I can't precisely turn it because I'm using so much of my strength to do so. So if I could give you the Sprint and somehow you could fix that where it turned anything half as well as the Civic did, I would be probably playing around in FSP. But I could not stand this steering.
And that's the problem when you put a 9 or 10 inch wide wheel on a car that was designed with a 5.5
or 4.
You overdrive the 4. I mean, what's the Sprint? Was it a 13x4?
Yes, no, maybe a 12. Whatever. I'll go look. I'm probably gonna see it today. It's nuts. It's just Had I known, I ordered 13x10s, and let me tell everybody out there: don't ever take a Sprint and get 13x10s because of this magical thing called scrub radius. But I didn't know that because I'm not a builder. But now at least I've learned that. But I learned it after ordering custom-made wheels.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we built the STS Civic for CSP, it's like it's easier to drive, I think, an STS Civic at the limit than it certainly was the EF in CSP, because with the bigger tires, the increased horsepower. I mean, like I said, my car made over 140 at the wheels, and the car was, ironically enough, not as light as what the current STS Civics are. But, you put big wheels and a limited slip and a lightweight clutch and flywheel in an EF, and it completely changes everything.
Yeah. Oh,
Do you know what power you guys were getting out before, like an ST trim? And once again, I know that's changed more recently with all the tuning and such. But what kind of bump did you get going to SP in that D16?
So from mine, I had my STS motor was built, stock pistons, but I mean fresh rings, and then the cylinder head was gone through legal. And my car made, well, on a dyno jet, it made 125 and like 118 foot-pounds of torque. And then when I went to 40 over pistons and individual throttle bodies and tune, I went up to 144 and 123 foot-pounds of torque. So not a huge increase in torque, but the overall number, and that's one of those things where it's like dyno sheets are numbers don't mean anything. It's where the curve is. I overlaid my STS dyno plot and then my CSP build dyno plot, and they look like completely different engines. You know, so it's like, yeah, it only made a couple more foot-pounds of torque, but between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM, it made 16 more foot-pounds of torque compared to what the STS car was.
That's the huge part in autocross.
Right, you know, and ironically enough, it's like I ran my individual throttle bodies on the car, and it was incredible, but it was very, with the Z-Dyne ECU, it was very, you couldn't tune off of throttle position sensor. It wanted part map, you know, so basically it's like it was only phenomenal at full throttle, but part throttle the car was terrible. I actually switched to a Skunk 2 intake manifold on the car, and at the same time I switched over to a Honda ECU, and the car lost technically like 2 horsepower, but between 3,000 and 6,000 RPM, we gained like another 10 foot-pounds of torque and like 15 horsepower.
Wow. I need to write that down so I can come back and listen to that part again.
Yeah, it was just shocking how much different the car was partial throttle. And a lot of that is, again, it's like, you know, to spend the money on having somebody who's very qualified to tune a car, I can't stress that enough. You know, you get what you pay for. You know, and I learned my lesson the hard way with my SMF car when I built a D series turbo, and I didn't want to spend the money, and ended up, you know, having a catastrophic engine failure. And at the end of the day, that me trying to save about $4,000 cost me $20,000.
Oh, because,
you know, it's like it destroyed everything. When the rod bearing went, it took out the crank. It took out, you know, I had Carrillo rods. It shot the rod through the front of the motor. It took out the radiator. It took out the oil pan, and it shot the piston up so hard it actually bent the block, or it bent the cylinder head rather. So it destroyed absolutely everything on that motor. So.
Okay, so that's even more reason I should not do anything but take an engine apart, because I keep people, some of the people locally that either work at shops or own shops, like years ago, they're like, oh, your Type R, just take it apart and rebuild it. And they go, when you rebuild it the second time, you'll truly learn, because you will have screwed up something the first time. But for me, I don't want to drive across the country for a pro solo and break. I don't want that to be, at least not to blame myself, I guess. Be like, oh yeah, I didn't get that right, did I?
Well, and conversely with the Type R motors, those were all hand built too. I mean, you know, depending on, there's a huge difference in those motors.
Are you saying, so if they're hand built, somebody probably needs to be just as good to know what they're looking at, or to get it back into whatever spec it was in?
Right. I think you almost like, well, and I can only judge this off of the Type R motor, but the motor that Travis Roebuck has in his SMF Civic, the red EG, you know, that was a JDM motor, and I mean, it only had 10,000 miles on it. So I mean, but we took the valve cover off and looked at the lash, and you know, the porting on the cylinder head was incredible, and we bought it from a JDM engine chassis, you know, one of those, you know, online places. So it's like, that's just the way those motors were, the Type R motors, and you know, not so much the S2000 motors, but the Type R motors in particular were that was a labor of love that Honda built with those motors.
Yeah, I heard that the first AP1s, that those were also built by hand. So it's something I've never taken apart. I wouldn't know what I'm looking at. Now I want to go Google how to look at a valve lash or something, but it'd be interesting to see if I would even notice the differences.
Yeah, because that was just an interesting thing, and I, like I said, Aaron Byram has built my motors, and the motor that I currently have in my car was his Time Attack motor. He had an EK chassis that he ran at World Challenge, or the Time Attack, for NASA and stuff. And the cylinder head work on my motor is just, it's incredible. To duplicate my engine, I couldn't even. I mean, it'd be $15,000 or $20,000 to rebuild my motor.
And once again, you are for sure. I wouldn't have the ability because we haven't practiced and done it enough to even be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not an engine builder, so I mean, I'm more of a, I like to tune, suspension setup and stuff like that. And I mean, I know my limits. I think that's the big thing. You need to know your limits. I think it's also good to tinker though too. So I mean, but it's like welding. If you don't weld all the time, you should probably not try it.
So if you're at nationals and you need welding, you find somebody that knows how to weld to come fix your car.
Find somebody that knows how to weld. Yeah, you get Brawson, you give him some IPA beer or something, and get him to weld your chassis. Because I know that like Brian and Don Cool, they broke their subframe on their SMF CRX, had to weld that thing back together. I think Don actually welded it, but it's just crazy what these cars are doing now. The top level cars. I mean, they like to kill themselves. I mean, like a lot of the SMF cars, they've got kind of a short fuse. Stuff doesn't last forever.
I want to highlight to people, I have spent a whole bunch of money on alignments, and I kind of cringe at first when I walk out, but every time I've been so happy that I spent that money. And yes, I'm pretty sure that with string alignments, I could figure it out or get the smart strings, which I hope to do at some point, because like Whitener had said, they like to check their alignment when they get to nationals after the trailer ride out there. They like to check the winning cars or cars that did well afterwards to see if they're still the same or what they are. So that's something else that's huge. I kind of hinted at that earlier about the camber. It can be huge if you're in the class and you want to be in the top, let's say 10 or you want to be in trophy spots. That stuff is huge to check and to know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it kind of depends on the car too, because I think STS cars can go out of alignment a lot quicker than people realize. Because the polyurethane and a lot of guys probably still have run a lot of the Mugen OEM rubber stuff. That the cars move a lot. And I think with the camber that everybody runs, it's like running 4 degrees of negative camber in those cars. I mean, stuff comes loose.
And that reminds me, the ball joints get worn. Like part of them wears away, I noticed when I took the car apart a couple of years ago.
Right, yeah. I mean, and that's one thing, like with my car, I've got a lot of my cars now spherical, so it's like it doesn't move. But, I mean, I check my alignment. I mean, we did 5 events last year. It was on the alignment rack 3 times.
Wow.
Again, I mean, and I've strung aligned my cars. I mean, and a lot of it, unless you have a flat concrete pad that's truly flat, you're doing yourself a disservice. You've got to have a level. I mean, if you have a level setup pad, and but you need to be able to. You almost need to get it aligned, and then while it's there, set your strings up and go. Okay, are these readings the same as what the computer's saying?
Oh, that's a great point. So, could you bring it home and set it down and, let's say, mark a spot you're always going to check it in and see what your settings say compared to the alignment rack?
Right, because a buddy of mine built his own camber gauges and everything else. He did them out of, and he's an engineer, and he built, plumb bobs, and, he's like an old school engineer. He's got a 68 Corvette Mike Parakis, and he set his alignment up, and, and I drove the car. I'm like, I just don't think it's right. And we set it, and his scales were level and everything. And, come to find out, we put it on the alignment rack, and it was completely different. So, sometimes the strings can be, and a lot of it, people who do strings, I'm like, you got to do fishing line. You need it to be very tight. I mean, you can't just, do normal I've seen some people who do like, string. I'm like, no, you've got to, and the thing is, you've got to have it repeatable. I mean, you almost need to set up, because I know a lot of the smart gauges, they've got the adjustable, you've got to like put Sharpies on it, and you've got to lock it down, and you have to be able to repeat it. You have to be able to take it off, put it back on the car, and you have to measure it, and it has to be the same. Because if it's not the same, it comes down to tire wear and everything else. Because I mean, you can make a measurement, and if the car's not completely level, it throws everything off.
Oh wow! So for one, I would have had normal string, probably, maybe nylon. Maybe I would have upgraded to nylon string. But you just pointed out, let's say the car's higher or lower because of tires. That right there is going to change it to some degree, I guess. Tire tread wear.
Oh, absolutely. We set my and Nick and I were working on the scales, and I didn't realize that he had swapped tires. Tire pressures are huge. And that's one piece. And we were working on the car, and this was on the SMF car last year, and I've got like 3 sets of the same wheels, or 2 sets of the same wheels. So I had put my setup tires have they've got the same tire pressure, so they're all set at 35 psi, so we get a consistent read. Well, Nick, I didn't realize I was doing something, and Nick had put the different wheels on because those are the wheels we were going to run. Well, the right front and the left rear were off by I'm like, what has changed on the car? And I'm like, and I'm changing and checking the ride height. I'm like, what has changed? And I'm like, wait a minute, these aren't the same tires. The tire pressures were off. So it's like it threw our corner weights off completely, which is one of those deals where I'm like, oh man.
Wow. So
shocking,
And I assume that these, I'm going to say 3R Racing, would probably set the tires before they corner balance, but you want to set your tires probably as close to your racing PSI as possible.
Yeah. You just need to be consistent on that. But and it's weird because I worked on like I said, working on the IndyCar team and the ALMS team for all the years. I mean, they do, they're on scale pads and they string align it, but they've also got, they've got chassis jig pins where they slide the alignment bars into the body of the car. So it's like, you could bump into the alignment strings and it's no big deal, but if you're setting up, jack stands and string alignment, it's just like, you're just spending so much time measuring the car. If you can do it right and you can repeat it, it's worth doing.
Yeah, I wish I knew enough to think. I keep thinking if you had something that was perfectly square that you could always align your car into, that's kind of what you're getting at here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a Fiat X19 that we've been working on for an XP car, and we've got a place in the garage that we have, sharpied off on the pavement where we know that we need to have 3, stainless steel shims under this scale pad. So, you just need to be repeatable. As long as you do it in the exact same place every single time and the scales are level, then your measurements should be good.
Yeah, true. Can you roll it out, roll it back in, set back up your alignment strings if you dare take them down, and is it the same? Oh, here's something set up in alignment-wise. Have you ever done the different spring rates up front, like Hollis did, Ian Baker or Mike Snyder, those guys? Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they were changing, 50-pound spring rates? Yeah. I never really, like I said, being on, working on the race team, the only spring or the owner corner weights that matter are the front. The rears, which is ironic because even like on the ALMS and the Indy cars, they don't even really care about what's on the back of the sprint, the back of the car. It's just the front. That's all that matters because it's where everything happens anyway. But I've never messed with it, but that was when did they start doing that? Probably in mid 2000s, I think.
Yeah, I want to say now it's probably 5-6 years ago that I knew at least that they had tried that, and I'm like, oh, I should look into that. Yeah, right.
Well, I think that's when you're down to the point where you're trying to find a thousandth of a second. Yeah,
exactly. And that's where they said data showed, or that they would feel, I don't feel that my car turns one way better than the other unless it's lifting the left front. I'm not getting power down. That's the only thing I kind of notice in these Civics. It's not like, oh, I turn better to the right or left. I don't perceive that. The car is either where it's at and I'm going to get it where I want it or I don't.
And I think the corner balancing on that's very particular because the motor's on the left hand side of the car anyway, so it's like inherently there's going to be more weight biased towards the left front, with the driver weight and the way the motor's over on the driver's side of the car. So I think the increased spring rate. I mean, from a technical standpoint, it does make sense, but you could also fix it just with adjusting spring perches a little bit too. But I never messed with it, so I couldn't really have it. I don't think I could give you an educated answer on trying one or the other. I haven't done it, but I could see a reason to do it.
I realize I've thought about this, so I kind of have a clue what's going on here. For everybody listening, I think what we're trying to compensate for, if you put a stiffer spring on one side of these Civics, is that will then compensate for all the extra weight and not get as much body roll or more body roll. Therefore, you'll get the same camber curve, I guess, or same max camber.
Right.
In the same turn left and right.
Yeah, because the way the bump steer is, depending on how the car is set. Because a lot of the Civics run super low. So, although Ian and Mike Snyder, their CRX actually isn't very low. Not compared to some of the other guys.
And oddly enough, that reminds me, since Jason Frank's been on the podcast, they drove the CRX again. And once again, I think it was last year, like, this is terrible. I don't want to drive the car. They raised it back up and they got rid of the pogo effect. So for some reason, some of these chassis, and they could not, they tinker quite a bit and know quite a bit. They could not figure out what was going on. They raised the car back up. I don't know if that means an inch or half an inch. But it fixed it, and obviously he could compete in it again. So,
right, yeah. Jason and Hillary and I we chat quite a bit, and we've talked about the pogoing, and it's like we'll throw more spring at it, because those cars still inherently, and I think you almost have to run the car super low to make the tires work, and when you do that, I think it somewhat affects the suspension geometry too. So it's like you can't have it too low. So, or you have to have it so low, but limit the suspension travel so it doesn't have a choice to move. That catch-22.
And is that suspension the same as my '89 Civic? Is it pretty much the same, or is with the wheelbase difference? Is it different? Should I?
They're basically they're identical in the front. The wheelbase, the trailing arms are the same in the rear too. So there's really not much. It's just the wheelbase difference. And that's what makes that car kind of snappy though too. I don't know. I don't know if the days of the Civic are numbered in STS. I don't think that I still think that you can win in those cars.
Yeah, and that's where I've never driven a CRX. I was glad that driving Whitener's car, I was able to compete and actually beat everybody at the Pro Solo finale. But then obviously Jeff won in the CRX at Solo Nationals. So I still hope that these can. And then Whitener now has a Miata, which supposedly he drives faster than any of his Civics. So there's a chance out there that he may be, at least he believes that the Miata is going to outdo for sure the Civics. Yeah, so with the CRX versus Miata versus Civic, it's going to be interesting to see if Whitener comes out in a Miata, if he can truly outduel all the Civics and CRXs, which honestly, if he can, and we could ever separate the class again, I think we would have two very healthy ST Miata, ST Civic CRXs going at it. I bet we'd have 40 or 50 cars in each class.
Well, that's the interesting thing because although Canik hopped in a E Street car, because Andrew Canik and Jason Frank, they're all up in Wisconsin, and they pound on each other every event. And then, consistently, it's like, Jason has been fast, at every event. And then Canik was able to, beat him at Nationals the last couple of years in STS. So it seems like the Miata kind of, is a more transition-friendly car, very kind of CST-like. I think it's just more, I think it's, at the end of the day, a 50-50 weight balance car is always going to be faster than a front-wheel drive Civic.
Yeah, and like you were saying about CSP, maybe when you get to the higher grip levels, that's where the Miata can truly shine. I can see I don't know. I think pretty much all of them can have Mega Squirt, which have been developed for years for those. But between that and the higher grip and 50/50 weighting, they're getting to take advantage of that grip better.
Yeah, I mean, they're not as fast as the CRX in a straight line for sure, and they have inherent braking issues. The Miata's pretty notorious for locking up the left front brake, so that they have their quirkiness. But I mean, they're pretty skinny, and they're pretty low, and the weight transfer is pretty good. So, and those cars also are to the point where they don't have enough horsepower where you can really, I think, honestly mess up and just keep your foot planted, and the car will do it. I think that's the big thing that I think when you get to the point, an ST, you're not dealing with higher horsepower cars like, with an STU BMW, or a 350Z or something like that, like, in Highcotter's car. It's like, throttle modulation actually does make a huge difference, Yeah,
and that's where people that aren't at this altitude, it does make a difference on how smooth even things are coming off the brake pedal and back into the gas. I just noticed I go down to like Lincoln, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with my car? Well, it's my right foot being an on-off switch.
Right. And then a lot of that, I mean, I think you can get away with that a lot more when you left foot brake.
Oh, good point, because you're blending more probably?
Right, yeah. I mean, you can actually crack the throttle. You can lift off the throttle quite a bit and be left foot braking, and it's not as knife edge, like with I'm sure with your Integra Type R, if you were somewhere on course and you just lifted off the throttle, those cars were pitch sensitive. You lift it off, I mean, it's like you're going around. If you don't catch it, you're going around. But when you left foot brake, you're just dragging the inside rear tire, and you're not allowing the weight transfer to the outside front tire so quickly, because the left front tire is dragging the right rear and the left rear dragging too. It's like it's almost acting like a limited slip in its own way, because you're connecting all four of the tires to control the speed and the entry speed into a corner when you left foot brake.
Yeah, I can't wait actually to get back in the Civic. At Spring Nationals on the test course, I did some right foot only braking. But I want to see if I can, especially once again, I think it's so important to have clocks up, run a slalom or run some small section over and over again, and just see, does it really prove to be much of a difference? And is there much of a learning curve to get there? And actually, honestly, running Solo Storm at the same time would be something, taking the time afterwards to break it down to look at it.
Oh, yeah, it'd be huge. I mean, just talking about this, I mean, my car's back up on jack stands. I'm pulling the gearbox out to go through and replace the diff. It just makes me want to go out and run a car. I'm like, well, I'm seriously contemplating on hijacking Chad's STR ST1000 and headed down to North Carolina just to go run. It doesn't even matter what I drive. I just want to go out and run something that's in a competitive car. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be 70 here on Friday, and then we're going to have snow on Saturday. So it's just kind of the season's over. So got to travel. I'm like, is 6 hours a local? I can justify that. I'm willing to drive 6 hours for a local. And then, of course, show up and bicker and complain because I don't think the course is quite right, but I should really, just shut my mouth and just go have fun.
Oh yeah. Tell me some of the things you've done outside of just driving. Have you instructed? Have you designed courses? What else have you done?
Kind of my mentor, Mike Fair, who's he's an Ohio Valley Region member. He and I designed courses the late '90s and early 2000s at local events. We did quite a bit with a little lot. So I mean, I've done some course design. I was the Great Lakes Division divisional solo steward for 2 years back in 2000, 2001. So I've done, well, actually, no, later than that. But I mean, I've done some driving instruction at local events, at local region events, just to try and help out the club. And I've done some track time events too, not just more lapping days and whatnot. I enjoy doing track days, but just from my standpoint, the only car that I really have is somewhat of a knife edge autocross car that was really only designed to do about probably 80 miles an hour, and anything over that would be a little concerning.
Yeah, that's where I'm on the opposite end spectrum. I took an Evo out, but the brakes didn't like the track very quickly. But taking an EF Civic out there, I was like, I'm kind of bored. Like, this is a long straightaway to try to get to 100 miles an hour.
Oh yeah, you got time to check your Twitter feed and.
Like, here's a little Snapchat, a live broadcast right here for you guys. We're still in the straight. Yes, we are.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see the benefit of being able to do some track days, and I've never really had a huge desire to do wheel to wheel stuff, but only based off of the financial liability. Because if anything happens to my car, I'm like, I'm done. Like, I can't afford to. Yeah, I can afford to buy another EK chassis, but it's like if I really wad it up, I'm like,
You'll be back in You'll be in an EF and STS.
Yeah, bumming rides from.
No, actually, you know what? You just sell your car. I'll get you an FSP Sprint to play with. There you go. We're done.
Oh, that sounds, because I hear you've got like 12 of them.
I've got to brag. I got $500 in my pocket last week for selling one. How cool is that?
That's pretty awesome. You like doubled your money.
No, I lost a good amount of money because I overpaid. Plus, I flew to Dallas to get it and drove it back. But I truly sold a car. Like, one of them is gone. He wanted to take the engine out of the one that Van left there as a parts car. I was like, no, this car has to leave. Like, the whole thing needs to go.
So do you and Van? So was that Van's car, or did you guys share it, or how was that?
No, so it's all Van's fault. No, it's Van and Kevin Wenzel's fault. Van keeps talking about FSP for probably years. He's saying, we got to do this. And he still talks to me about cars. I'm like, don't worry, Van. I'm not going to build another car. I thought I wanted to. So Van's like, we have to get the Suzuki something or another, the 4-cylinder like the Honda engine. But he talks to Wenzel. I said, let's talk to Wenzel before we dare do something like this. I'm like, those cars are like $1,000. No big deal. We can figure out how to get one. Wenzel's like, no, you want a Sprint Turbo. Because one came in the shop and has a stuck wastegate. That thing moves. So next thing you know, I am sourcing a car out of North Carolina. The $700 to ship it cost more than the car cost. Of course, everything since then, although we've not touched the engine or gone through any of that, but the shocks, we found that a limited slip is made for it. So it's a car that I funded. Van helped out on some different things. But once again, we put 13 by 10s on it, and I hated it.
You're asking an awful lot, of turning, accelerating, and braking with the front wheels with the manual rack. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, and there's no automatic or no electronic option for power steering. Oh, what's crazy is this whole, I kept telling Van, I'm like, we should try skinnier wheels and tires. No, it's fine. I can drive it like this. I'm like, Van, I know you can drive it like that, but I can't imagine the force you're doing. He finally tried, I guess it was 3 years ago now, before it then had a fuel issue and it wasn't running right. We put 13 by 8s on the front, and he's like, you've got to go drive in the test course. Well, he was amazed because all of a sudden you could actually turn the wheel again.
So were you on the 255s on the car?
No, I think we actually went down to 225s. Because
on the 10s, yeah. Because
No, we went down to 13 by 8s. So we probably tried the 255s on the 10s, but those quickly went away. It was almost undrivable because with limited slip in there, you would turn the car in and you had to manually, physically try really hard to turn the wheel back.
Yeah, that was interesting because when I ran my FSP, the 99 Civic, we tried the 255s on the 13, and I hated it. We ran a 225 square setup on the car the entire time, and it was consistently faster. We did some testing. Now, unfortunately, it's like we did testing on they were all on 9s. So, I think the Hoosier really needs to be stretched. The sidewall really needs to be stretched, but we couldn't make the 255s any faster. We got so much wear out of the 225s, like it didn't matter.
And that's where your car, let's say it's 1,900 pounds, the Sprint is like 1,500 pounds. So once again, it just doesn't need that much grip. I don't think it can even use it. It can't heat up the tire, especially in the rear. We kept saying, how can we get something like a 195 that's an autocross compound?
Well, and then that's the problem with that is, I mean, you basically had a 205 60-13 was your other option, and then that sidewall height was way too tall. It was a 23-inch carcass. So it's like you were, the only way you could do it is to do a square setup and actually rotate front to rear after the first run, which is what, we did, because, when we were running, at one point they kind of like outlawed tire blankets for I think one event. But I mean, I like the car loose anyway, and, Nick would unfortunately be the sacrificial lamb that he'd go out. We would have a joke, a running bet. It's like, so what corner are you going to spin out?
Yeah.
Deals where I'm like, it's like, it's going to go. Which one? What do you want? Over, under. Which one are you going to go off?
Yeah, even in STS land, I would always remind myself, hey, the first quarter to half of this run, the first run, be cautious. And as we've talked to so many people about the mental approach, if you're a single driver car and you know it's going to be loose, you need to just have that mindset that, hey, I'm going to go out there and be cautious and then maybe attack a little more. But once again, you may find that you have even better times because of that. If not, and you're the second driver, you're like, hey, you just warmed this up, so I know I should be able to go faster and not be nearly as loose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, if you're a single driver, drag the brakes, get the brakes hot. Especially on cooler days, get the brakes hot so you get a little bit of a thermal, wash into the, the rear wheels. Anything you can do to help get a little bit of heat in the rear tires without being, ridiculous in grid or, doing anything silly out on the street before an event.
And like you said, switching tires front to back, for sure at Pro Solos between first and second drivers, I always do that because I'm like, at some point, these front tires, they're just going to be hotter and hotter and hotter. But what you just said makes sense. If you're a single driver, get a buddy to come over there, get a jack and an impact, and switch front to rear after first runs, because your fronts are going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's got a Milwaukee or something with a decent a cordless impact, and I mean, you could trip over an impact in any grid now. I mean, they're everywhere. So, anything to do. And that's the interesting thing you're talking about with, you can cool the tire down. You can spray them down. You can do everything else, but you cannot get the belts cool. But, at the end of the day, it's like if you can't get the metal carcass of the tire cooled down, you're just, it's like spraying water on your sunburn. It feels good instantly, but it's still hot. So, you really have to get the core temperature down. The easiest way to deal with that is just to rotate front to rear. Obviously that only works on same side,
Yeah, your square setup. And that's where I've noticed people with Porsche spraying their rotors, like just trying to cool it all down. Like, how can we get some of this heat out of these front tires?
Yeah, which, I mean, it's like, that's an expensive proposition. You don't want to shock the rotor too much, but, But, yeah, I mean, I try and spray down the inside of the front wheel and try and cool water as much as I can. I've always been a big proponent of keeping the tires cool. But that was back, when Hoosiers, originally, the Hoosier did not like being, I started autocrossing on the Hoosier Autocrosser, which was their bias ply tire. And the cooler that tire was, the better it was. And then the Hoosier SO3, and that was the same with you. I mean, you noticed, I'm sure you noticed that with the Type R. The Hoosier SO3, SO4, SO5, those tires, the hotter they got, the better they were. But they had a very short shelf life.
Yeah, about 12 runs, ideally.
So, yeah, for you, camper challenged, and I don't miss those days. The new, it seems like the Hoosier A7 is definitely a significant improvement over the A6.
Yeah, it sounds like much like the Avon, people are getting 100 runs out of them.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where I was saying, kind of like jumping back a little bit on car setup. I mean, with the differential that I've got in my SMF car right now, I'm like, at a pro on the A6s, if I drove very aggressively, we could go through a set of tires with two drivers at one pro, and that's not good. So the diff was, the diff worked great in a straight line, but on unloading, on corner exit, at 6,000 RPM, if I would map throttle, it would actually spin the tires to the rev limiter. So it's like at 60 miles an hour, I'm spinning both the tires. We would actually destroy a set of tires in one.
So which type of limited slip do you like? And for me, compare that to the stock limited slip in the Type R, so I can have some kind of thought comparison.
Well, the Type R is a helical, and that's kind of similar to what a Quaife is as well, but it's got more lockup. The differential that I have in my car now currently has a really super aggressive ramp angle, which on paper looks great, and with the spring rates that we run, like I said, we run really high spring rates. I thought that the car would be flat enough that it wouldn't affect it, but it would unload the inside front tire, and it would still spin both tires, but it was really spinning the inside tire more than I realized. Kind of said, like I said, me being a little bit bullheaded, I thought I could work around that, or I thought it was going to, do a little more than I thought it would. But I think the one way or the 1.5 way, like what the Geikens or the M factories are, a clutch type diff is more forgiving, and I think it will actually put power down more evenly.
So, okay, you just pointed out something I'd heard, that one type of these diffs, if a wheel lifts or gets light, it's not really working anymore, so you have to really consider that for your application. Whereas I think what you just said, the clutch style, you can make that wheel light and it should still be putting power to the other one.
Right, yeah, and that's one of those deals where, and a lot of people I think run the Geiken and the S2000, which, in my experience, I really like with the Miata, like a lot of people still run the factory Torsen in their CSP cars or their SSM cars. Same with the, I know Brian Carwin runs the stock diff in his STR S2000 as well, and he had a Geiken in it. And just, I think it was just, I'm sure it's feel too, but there's just so much in the setup too. You can't just throw a different differential in the car and just expect it to, out of the box work. It's almost like, you've got a car with 2 degrees negative camber, and then you just throw, you throw Toyos on it that need 4 degrees of camber. It doesn't work. You have to change the car. So, but, I think, with me changing the diff, I've got to change a bunch of stuff anyway. So, it's just,
so I got to pick your brain for all of us EF folks out there. And if they allow STS to have limited slips, what would you start with for a D16A EF Civic?
The new M Factory, I'm trying to sound like a plug, the new M Factory metal plate diff, I would use. Now, I had the Quaife in my CSP Civic, and it was phenomenal. And we ran, at that point, I had the Koni SSPS 3s, so the short and revalve Koni races with like 900-pound springs in the front and 700 in the rear and no front bar, and the car was phenomenal. But it was also on 13s, so the center of gravity was a lot lower. The car didn't really weight transfer that much. But I think either the Quaife, I think it really depends on the horsepower output. I think the Quaife would work phenomenally well, but I also think that like an M Factory 1-way or 1.5-way would work as well. Kind of just depends. I think the Quaife may work better for lower horsepower applications because it was great in our FSD Civic as well. We never spun the inside front tire, but then again, that car weighed 2,100 pounds and only made 135 horsepower. It wasn't spinning the tires, and it seems like the STS Civics aren't really spinning the inside front tire. It doesn't seem like they're really spinning it pretty much anywhere.
It's not that they're spinning
the only
it.
ones that do are it's just not putting the power down the right way.
Yeah, because only certain events, and I ran the front bar until everybody like Jeff Wong's like, why do you have the front bar still on there? I was like, because it got stuck on there, and I just haven't taken it off. Not realizing that would help me spin it more. But in certain cars, I'm not so sure it's been mine, but I've definitely done some type of big sweeper and noticed that it's not putting down power. So it must be getting light enough to just let that one slip a little bit. Are those two limited slips, the Quaife versus the M Factory? Will one of those handle a light wheel versus the other, or are they the same type?
Well, I guess the other question is when a lot of people don't. Well, I wouldn't think, but when you get rid of the front sway bar, you really need to increase spring rate by at least 150
Yeah, and of course I didn't do any of that.
The effective spring rate on that front sway bar on the EF, I mean, it's like 100. I may be off as I'm comparing, the EK to the EF. I don't have a front bar on the SMF car either, but it's quite a bit. So you can't just take the front bar off. It's like, well, now it's worse. I'm like, well, no, you got to go up in spring rate to make a comparative evaluation.
That's a good point. So, and I didn't even think to do that. I just took it off because everybody else had it off, and I didn't honestly notice a difference. But my car would bottom out, as in the upper control arms would hit quite often. Well, the sway bar was effectively helping me have more spring rate to eliminate something like that.
Right, it was getting rid of the weight transfer. So, I mean, I think if you went up 200 pounds in spring rate in the front of the car, you would effectively get rid of the bottoming, the car bottoming out mid-corner.
Versus having the sway bar back on there. And what you're saying makes
Correct.
me think with a limited slip, maybe having the sway bar back on there would definitely be something to try. And my first guess is if people think they're worse with it right now, with a limited slip, it might be better for some reason. Am I thinking something possibly there?
We did some testing on our CSP car with putting the sway bar on with a limited slip, and it almost made the car really slow transitionally. So we took the bar off, and we had the HF, the hollow bar on, and which I hated it. I mean, everybody made a big deal about getting it, so I put it on, and I had it on for 2 or 3 events, and then I just put it in the back of the back of my truck and just left it, just in case if we needed to put it on. But we put the limited slip on. We did do a test, and we tested that, and actually the rear lower control arm, the stress bar, the lower stress bar. I don't know if anybody that to me made a huge difference in the car on the EF. I was shocked at the difference that the lower rear stress bar did.
Plus, they look cool.
They look cool, yeah, but it's like, and the EF, even though it's a great chassis, it still flexes quite a bit. I mean, it moves around a lot, and and I did the upper rear stress bar and the lower rear stress bar, and then I took the lower rear stress bar off, and the car, at Grissom we've got a test course, which is kind of like it's a 45-second course for most cars, and maybe it was one of those Pavlov's dog kind of things. I'm like, I can tell a difference. I just didn't like the way it felt. It felt more crisp. The more, the triangulated or, the upper stress bar on the front of those cars really helps too. I don't know if anybody was running the new Speed front upper.
I think we've all taken them off. Tim Smith had all those things on that car. I was like, your car is heavy because of all this stuff. Of course, he had the remote reservoirs attached. But I have them all sitting somewhere. But I was like, why does he have all this extra weight? So once again, not thinking that would make any difference except for the weight, all that stuff came off right away.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think, Buddy Club makes them, and Skunk 2 actually makes a lightweight aluminum version. That, personally, now, ironically enough, I don't have it on mine either, but that's because of the K series. It's a nightmare to get the front stress bar on the cars. But, I think the upper stress bars make a huge difference on the EFs, front and rear.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some people are running them in the rear, and I once again assumed, I got to quit doing this in life, assume that's just for the seatbelt to tie to or a camera to go to. But it might be that, hey, once again, it's stiffening up the rear, which we kind of drag it around anyway. But yes, the more stiff, I guess, the quicker it'll be and everything. We'll get to that.
I think it just, I was going to say, I think it just honestly just helps weight transfer in the rear of the car for, basically at mid corner, the car. Because, I mean, if you think about that car, I mean, the only thing that's holding those rear quarter panels together are the C-pillar and the roof, which has a big hole in the roof, too, with the sunroof. I mean, those cars actually flex quite a bit. There was, and of course, I don't have the video anymore. The joy of divorce, I kind of lost all my images on the home computer, but I had a bunch of pictures of my EF in CSP trim where you could see the hood deflection and like the headlights moving in CSP, like just the chassis deflection in the car mid-corner.
And that's where the front and rear bars all help with that.
ironically, that's why I actually ended up going with the EK chassis and SMF, because it's, as good as the EF chassis is, the EG chassis is quite a bit better torsionally, but the EK is even stiffer than that. And, and our car's down to minimum weight anyway, so, and the wheelbases from the EG to the EK are the same. The EF is quite a bit smaller shorter wheelbase compared to the CRX, which is just, Minnie Mouse. That thing is just tiny. But, I think, I think all three of the chassis are equally competitive. I don't know, I still think that the EF Civic is a FSP car, which would make me really want to build another one.
Yeah, I should hold on to one of these other shells I have that's the non-sunroof, just in case.
Yeah. Well, but I think at the end of the day, it's like, if your cars are down to 1,900 pounds in ST trim, and then you can go to, into a street prepared trim where you can put 4-pound carbon seats. It's like you can get the cars to 1,860 pounds easily in street prepared trim and get another 10 to 15 horsepower out of them with a limited slip. I think those cars would be
getting close to the fun EP Civic I drove. That was fun.
Yeah, and that's just, and that's the interesting thing too, because it's like if you're used to a certain speed, corner speed wise in the Civic now, wait till you put big tires on it and a limited slip. Then again, inherently you have the issue of you're trying to turn, how, it can be you have to be really aggressive on the steering wheel with the EF currently in ST trim. It's like it's almost times 2 or times 3. It's like it's more and more and more steering input, and the limited slip. It doesn't automatically unwind the wheel either.
Oh, same
so
type.
You have to turn So it's like you're turning. It's like it's not just a corner entry. It's like you have to physically, move the steering wheel as well.
And that was crazy to have to do that in the Sprint. I'm like, what is going on here? Once again, I think it was scrub angle or something was really, we had to lock in and wanted to stay there.
Yeah, you can change the caster a little bit to make it better or worse, but more caster typically makes the steering wheel not want to recenter anyway. So we tried a ton of caster in the EP car, and it turned in so fast, but you physically had to manually turn the steering wheel back. We only ran it at one event like that.
Yeah, that would take a lot to get used to. Once again, after you've done something for decades.
Yeah, it was super fast. The turn-in was incredible, but it's like, you would find yourself where you actually had to take, on a right-hand turn, you actually physically had to, force your right hand back to 12 to center the car when you would come back out of a corner. It was difficult to drive, But we had,
you're describing the Sprint, kind of, basically. Yeah. I was like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
Oh, have you been in or around the newer Civic SIs, like the coupes? I was around one at Nationals. I watched it go on course. I'm like, is that in stock trim? It doesn't roll that much. I went over and pushed on it. I was blown away at how stiff it was.
Yeah, the spring rates are pretty crazy on those cars. Are you talking like Shenefield's Civic or what? Which one, I guess, what you're asking about? Yeah,
there's a lady. She's driving, maybe it's a 2000, I'd guess, 8 or 2012. I'm really going ranges here, but one of the slick SI two-door coupes.
Oh, Laura Harbor? And they're, yeah.
Yes, there you
Laura's
go.
Car. Yeah.
That car is...
Yeah, the spring rates are...
crazy.
Well, they're strut cars, so, the spring rates are really high, for what they are. But they're kind of like pogo sticks. They're... they've got an effective suspension range of about 2 inches. That's just the crazy thing about those.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine any newer car would be that stiff from the factory. It blew me away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Honda North America guys have built a couple of the the FD chassis or the F. Oh, geez, I can't even remember all the chassis names. They've got an 09 or maybe a 2012 Civic Si that they built for E-Prepared, and they run 1,500-pound springs in the front and 4,500-pound springs in the rear to try and get the thing to rotate. So,
just tow it out more.
Just tow it out, like zero camber in the rear and like a quarter degree each, a half degree or, half inch of tow out in the rear to get it to turn.
Yeah, that's all you need. And about 60 pounds of pressure.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on the Titanic. It's just like, it's just, it's not optimal. But, yeah, I was going to say the interesting thing about like the EF and the EG and the EK chassis, they're all very similar. So anything you do to any of the chassis all inherently kind of does the same thing.
Yeah, Jeff Wong complained mightily about the EG rear suspension with the Del Sol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he made so many changes. I'd see them at events out there changing the rear springs, and just they could not get that car to do what they wanted to do.
Well, I think inherently, and Jeff and I, chat quite a bit on personal message, and I jokingly told him, like, put the top back in the car. Like, the car flexes so much, and he noticed that it did make it. I think that's a great chassis, and I think it was a great idea, but that car was so flexible with that top out, I mean that car, I think if you could, if they made a hard top in that car would have had potential. Because the car was fast in a straight line. You ran against him. You know what it was like.
Oh, yeah, especially if he could get a fast course. Of course, also, I think they finally realized they were on the wrong tires. Had they had the setup for the right tires, forget it.
Right, yeah. He was kind of a contracted driver, and he was stuck with those. But, I said, if you got on a different tire, that car would be better. But the Del Sol chassis, the suspension geometry is very similar to it's an EG, but that chassis is so flexible. It's just
so
that'd be an interesting EP car, actually.
Oh, because you could fix it.
But yeah, you just burn the cage in the car, and because you can get 230 or 240 horsepower out of a B16.
And then you'd have limited slip also, which that was my big thing with him doing that. I was like, that car's heavier than your other car, and you're not really gaining torque. You're just gaining up top. I was like, it's going to be interesting.
Right. And it was a valiant effort. I mean, they spared no expense on that car. I mean, there's,
And more so, he didn't cut any time. I mean, they spent the time and put in all the effort, and it was amazing what they did to try to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. And they realized it wasn't going to work, and within a week they had that CRX. they can swing for the fence. They built those cars pretty darn quick.
Yeah, and then they bought a Civic as a backup, and now hopefully they'll be on the show soon. But they have even more cars. I'm like, okay, what are you driving now? You actually have rear wheel drive again. You guys take two cars to each event. Yeah,
they've got an ND Miata. I don't know who owns the ND, but their FRS or the twin that they have is an XTX car. So, but those are intriguing cars too. I mean, I didn't like where ST was going back in the early 2000s, but it seems like it's definitely kind of evened out, and I think they're all pretty amazing classes to watch. So,
yeah, and they're huge. I mean, I think the street tires have improved so much that it's fun to get out there. They last forever. You can drive to the events if you want to on them.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think at the end of the day, again, you're still on the theoretical pointy end of the stick. I'm like, you're still trailering to events, So, I think the top level people are really, the 10/10 people are, are still running.
That's where some of these street classes, believe me, I'm like, I keep showing up and driving the Porsche. Wow, and he just drove here on the tires. That's really nice. We didn't change anything. Oh, let's remember air pressure. There you go. It's quite tempting. It would be so nice if somebody could just say, hey, for the next 3 years, this new car will be competitive.
Well, and that's, that's one of those, the irony is being utterly ironic. We were at a local event and somebody was giving me guff about my, how much money I have in my Civic. And I leaned up against this Porsche Boxer. I said, how much do you have in this? You know, I'm like, and this car won't be competitive next year. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to sell it and you're going to buy something else. Now, granted, it's your daily driver as well. But, you know, the nice thing about having a street prepared or like an ST car that's not your daily driver, if it breaks, it's not the end of the world. You can still get to work the next day if you have, you know, a daily driver.
Yeah, true.
But,
and that's where I realized once I became serious about this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to nationals. I'm not even trophying. It's time to step it up. Okay, which cars are fast? And that was my thought process. I want to be competitive at this. I'm driving this Audi S4. I keep thinking I'm competitive up at altitude where I have a turbo advantage, but then I come down to sea level and a 330 BMW and a Type R on the same width tires, but 1,200 pounds lighter. That's what really got me. I was like, okay. And I drove that Type R across the country. I never trailered it. That was
wow.
like the heyday for me for 6 or 7 years. I just drove it, and I got 30 miles per gallon. That was a nice part. The tires, not so much, but that for a lot of people, if you can have some daily driver that you can drive and get the seat time, man, more power to you.
Yeah, I think like a C or now D Street, one of the twins would be an ideal, you know, daily driver, you know, or a Focus ST or something like that. I mean, although the Focuses are more camber challenged, but, you know.
Yeah, and that class has what, the Camaro is, the little engine Camaro's allowed in there?
Yeah, the little engine Camaro's allowed in there, and then, you know, the non-TRD, the BRZ, and then the non-TRD equipped cars are in D as well. I mean, D is going to be a pretty crazy class.
Especially pro solo wise, that with the WRX launch, that's going to be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be crazy, but you know, and again, it's one of those deals where, and I think it's cyclical. I mean, you know, classes kind of there's an ebb and flow to everything. You know, I remember, you know, in the early 2000s, F Street or F Stock was like out of control, and then within a period of 1 year, it's like F Stock went from like 60 cars to like 20. It's just like, you know, the crowd of people goes from, you know, the hot car for each year,
yep.
You know, whereas us poor suckers who build, you know, prepared and street mod cars, we you know, we have $500,000 in our 99 Honda Civics. You know, I don't know who's smarter. I'm not really sure, but you know,
everybody has their addictions. You know,
right, you know, and go ahead.
I'm going to switch topics on you here and tell us what you're thinking course-wise. You told us how much you walk the course or don't, then maybe you'll start walking more. With all this front-wheel drive experience, how do you attack slaloms and sweepers, and what are you thinking about as you go through a course?
Well, it's interesting because I was listening to I think Tom O'Gorman was saying something along the lines of he really kind of enters it at a lower speed and fast out, and I'm conversely, I think, quite a bit different. I charge into corners, but I may be relying on my left foot braking a little too much, though, too. So I've kind of, you know, in listening to your podcast, I'm like, you know, maybe I do need to change things up a little bit. But typically going into slaloms, depending on the gate, and when I walk the course, I definitely try and pace off each of the slalom cones, because what I found more and more at national events is they're not consistent. There's definitely, you know, there's so much effort being put into these course designs now where you can't just, you know, I mean, there's so much engineering, so to speak, in each of the courses, you really have to pay attention. But I think with the way I drive, I'm pretty fast in, and since I like the way my car is loose-wise, I can throw the car into corners, and if the car's, you know, if I'm going a little too quick, I can just use the slip angle and let the car scrub speed off and make the car work without the car being, you know, like hand over correction sliding around a corner. But, you know, I try and walk the course enough where I'm comfortable with where the car hypothetically should be. And then typically after my first run, I just throw it out the window because that didn't work. So Like, well, and that's weird because I'm usually a good judge on corner speed, but the way the courses have been lately, it's just I haven't been able. Maybe I'm not looking far. I look far ahead on course when I'm driving, but I don't look far enough ahead on course when I'm walking. Now, obviously, that's just because I'm walking it the first time compared to driving it, where I've had the additional walks to kind of get a familiarity with it. But I think being able to walk the course is very important to you. And I'll echo what the other, quite a few other guys have said. You need to walk it once without your friends, without looking at your, solo storm, with just quiet, looking ahead with nobody in front of you. I mean, I think that's key. I think if I had 2 good course walks where I wasn't chatting with anybody and I could just walk it, I think I would be much better than walking it 6 or 7 times, chatting with somebody.
Yeah, agreed. And what you were saying about driving hard into corners, what I'm realizing talking to the different people is those of us, especially in front-wheel drive, and then especially when we left-foot brake, we are the guys that consistently seem to charge into things. And it must be because it's almost like we have that safety valve that the left-foot braking really late is going to keep the car from looping. And I keep hoping in the back of my mind somewhere that I can somehow learn how to still left-foot brake but have that lift in there as well and use it, like you're saying, at different times. I'm just still convinced, although maybe I'll have to look at Solo Storm enough to prove it, that would be the best of all worlds if I can somehow charge in fast and out fast. Because the data shown from Honda Performance, when my buddy was working out there, he said it's all in the braking zone. He said for Indy, it's all in the braking zone. He said the rest of the stuff, they're all similar. It's whoever gains the most in the braking zone. Even if they slightly overdid it, but they did it better on average, they would be faster at the end of the next straight.
Right, and I will definitely echo something that Tom O'Gorman said too. And a lot of it is just, it's not how you brake, it's how you lift off the brake. I think you can really left foot brake or you can right foot brake. It all depends on the speed on which you release the brake pedal. So I mean, I think you can be just as fast in a in a left foot braking application that you can in a right foot braking application. It all depends on how. I mean, I think if anything with left foot braking, you're able to get on the throttle sooner because physically, unless you're heel towing, which is very difficult to do, unless you're in a 5-point harness in a race seat, you're kind of wallowing around in a stock class car, unless you can actually apply the brake pedal, and when you release the brake pedal, you kind of ease off of it. But any snappy behavior on any of the pedals is never good for the characteristics of the car.
Yeah, what you talked about, it was a couple of years ago. I finally, something I read said, hey, you need to release the brake pedal smoothly. And the best place I can tell people to practice or to think about this is entering a sweeper. That's where I noticed if I jumped off of it real quick, that the car would be shocked. Like it would slightly move and change my arc kind of drastically right there. Whereas at times I'm like, wow, I came off so smooth, as in the transition off of the pedal was nice and slow enough that it was phenomenal. So I don't know if a lot of these drivers would say this. I think to attack the pedal hard in and then soft off. And I will sit there and physically practice that when I'm sitting, let's say, in grid or at a Pro Solo pulling up to the lines. I will attack it hard and then try to come off easy, just to try to train my brain to do that.
Right, and ironically enough, like on-ramps and off-ramps are actually, theoretically speaking, like the safest place you can do that. When you're able to release on the pedal, I think a lot of it is more dependent on the type of car that you're driving. I think, with a lighter weight, lower horsepower car, you can probably actually get off of the brake pedal a little bit faster because the weight transfer, isn't as abrupt as, say, like in a Civic compared to like a super stock Corvette, whereas those cars don't like abrupt changes. You can't stomp on the gas, you can't really stomp on the brake. You've got to be transitionally smooth.
Yeah, that's where Tom Barry was talking about. He rode with me when I picked up the other Civic I bought from Jeff Wong. How it seems like he and I both try to drive the nose of our cars, where we're kind of being abrupt and throwing them around. And he keeps saying that Marshall's like looking at the data, going, "Look, that you don't want to do that. That's not the best." And it's like a crutch for us, or it's something we're used to. So it's almost like we want to keep doing it. But I keep trying to challenge myself to at least experiment to see, especially with data, can I do something different that's better and faster?
Well, yeah, and that's one of those things where when Mike Jr. Johnson had the Evo schools, and I think the first year that there was at Lincoln, I went out and I had him ride with me at a couple in my FSP car, and I wanted him to analyze, and I've never done an Evo school, but I mean, I understand the dynamics of it, and I'm grateful that the Evo school is around for everybody who is involved in autocross to be able to learn, because I think I've got some phenomenal instructors. But I had Junior in the car with me, and the first run we made, he just looked at my feet. And then the next run we made, he just looked at my hands. And then the next run, he looked at the course as we drove. And my runs were within, I think, of a tenth of a second. And I said, Mike, what do I need to do? He said, there's so much going on here. I don't even know where to start because I'm so left foot brake heavy and everything else. I think, and that's, again, like you and I have, you and I kind of are probably on the same page. It's like we do use it as a crutch. But again, I mean, if it's something that you've been doing for a long time, I mean, is it wrong to say that it doesn't work? Can you cut it cold turkey? Can you how easy is it to unlearn something that you've been doing for so long?
Or do you need instructors that can and do what you do to relate to you to compare to? That would be hard for me to go, oh, I know what you're doing, and yet you drive totally different or drive a totally different car. Yes, we can look at lines somewhat, but once again, depending on your braking style, it sounds like we even take different lines because of that. So that makes me think, and I know at Evo schools, they sometimes will try to get the instructors for the car. I mean, they switch around. But if you can get around somebody that's driving something similar, and now I'm thinking, if they don't left foot brake and you do, that is different. When I had James Darden drive, or not me, when Salil had four of us in the GT3, well, 2 events ago, we were riding with each other on purpose. We're just like, hey, let's see what you guys are doing that we don't do, vice versa. And I instantly could tell that he left foot broke because of the way he was able to pitch the car, hold the steering wheel, and adjust his speed with the brake and the gas pedal. It was drastically different than riding with people that don't left foot brake.
Right. And I think you can make left foot braking work in pretty much any car. I think it's the extremes. I think if you over left foot brake, I think it can make the car significantly worse. Conversely, if you over brake a car and the car's twitchy, you can fix that too. It's almost like a double-edged sword. Like you need to be able to modulate the brake. And, again, from the sound of it, it's like you and I, we can go into a slalom and we can barrel into it way too quick, and you can misjudge, the braking point and go, and I'm sure when you get to the point where you're like, oh man, you act, even if you left foot brake, you're still pulling off the throttle quite a bit. You're still doing a big lift. And that, I think with left foot braking, when you get on the brakes really hard and you realize you're going way too fast, I think it's almost, instinctual. You do lift off the throttle, and then that sets the car up where the car actually tilts a little, changes slip angle even more, and then you can get back on the throttle, and then you can correct.
But what you just said allows us to get away with something that I swear you can't do if you're just right foot braking, because the car will go around. And this is a test I'll have to do and get data and show it and prove it out. But I will sometimes go into these slaloms and I'll go into the second cone and brake there. So I'm trying to maximize my speed as far as possible. And it's ugly. It's not smooth. It's nothing that I hear Brian Peters describe. but I'm basically trying to carry my speed in as deep as possible. And I realize at that point I might overslow, but on average, the question is, on average, is it better or worse throughout the whole slalom?
Right, and I think a lot of it's so dependent on every corner entry, or entry into the slalom and exit out of the slalom. It's like, I think it's so dependent on, I think you really need to take each slalom as a very individual. It depends. If you're into a slalom and then you're going to be after the slalom, there's a hard right or left hand corner. I don't think it really necessarily matters if you are heavy on the brakes and you can carry speed, because I think that's more important to have there than if you are into like a 5-cone slalom and then it's a, decreasing radius, sweeper, where you actually can utilize constant speed and then get on the throttle a little bit faster. I think it gives you maybe a little bit, it gives you a 2 to 3 cone advantage of being able to increase or decrease speed when you left foot brake.
Surely. And what you said makes me realize I actually break a slalom down. You've got the entry section or the first couple cones, if it's long enough. You've got the middle section where I'm going to decide, am I going to accelerate out of this, or am I on line for one? I want to be tight to the cones. But what's coming up at the end of this? Can I accelerate out? And when I think I'm accelerating out, I'm going to get later and later in the slalom, trying to maximize that speed. But usually if it's not super tight coming into it, I almost always opt to carry my speed in, whereas most of these guys, and I love their consistency and I want to be as fast as them and as great as them, they will slow down first and then build their speed up to what they can do. In my mind, I'm still thinking, okay, if I can carry 5 miles an hour, 2 cones or 1 cone into it, that's got to be an advantage as long as I don't overly slow or get in too much trouble when I do. But it's not pretty, I guarantee you, when I'm doing this sometimes, of breaking that deep in.
Right. And that's one of those deals where you almost need to do like the sector time. It's like, if you can go into a slalom 4 or 5 miles an hour faster, as long as you don't overslow 4 or 5 miles an hour faster, minus, well, at that point it would be minus 10,
Yeah, can you get back to speed?
Yeah, can you make up the difference? Yeah. And I think one of those things where, driving with my buddy Chad, he doesn't left foot brake, and when I rode with him, and I'm not a good passenger either. I don't mean to say a good passenger. It's just like I have no concept. When you're not holding onto the wheel, you really have no concept. It's almost like a video game. You don't really know how fast you're going. You can kind of feel it, but it's like I have no control over this. And Chad, he's been autocrossing. He autocrossed a bunch, and then he took like 10 years off, and then he's got this STR car. Well, he went into the slalom, and he just did a constant speed, and it was so unnerving because, he kind of went in kind of fast, and the car just kind of, it kind of pushed through, and he just kind of pushed through the slalom. He used the push of the car to slow the car down, but it felt very unnatural, but very like to the point where it felt like it was on cruise control. It was like, steady state, steady speed, burn, and to me, it felt very unnatural. I got in the car and, but I'm also very aggressive, so I attack corners. So it's almost like it's not a fair generalization, because you almost need somebody like a Tom O'Gorman or a Reynolds or a Pilata, where you can say, okay, well, I want to have somebody who is honestly a better driver than me run, and then I want to get in the car and see if my aggression will pay off.
Yeah, exactly, back to back. And like with Tom,
right,
also saying he doesn't left foot brake in turbo cars, I'm like, wowzer, if there's any turbo lag there, I want to feel and see what you're doing, as well as see data on that to see how does that work, because that's something else that came up in Indy. Was once they went to the turbo cars, they said the data proved that the person not left foot braking wasn't getting the boost built up, and therefore that's why you're slower.
Right. Well, and that's the interesting thing, because if you look at what Tom has driven in, like Panda, it doesn't really have a lot of lag. PJ's car is fast. It's a monster as far as, the car doesn't have lag. So I think that car would actually, it doesn't really necessarily, you know, if you don't left foot brake, I don't think it matters that much on that car. Whereas, like, you know, if you would look at, you know, like a perfect example, like Andy McKee, and I'm trying to think about watching his video. His car, that car is a lag monster, his XP RX-7. But, I mean, I guess I would have to, like, look at his in-car video, but it's like, you know, he's on the throttle so much earlier, but I don't think he left foot brakes.
Yeah, so that means he has to get his braking done sooner to get using the 1 foot back over there.
Yeah, but again, it's like it gets to that point where it's like, you know, it's an XP car that has just insane amounts of grip, and it's like, again, it's like if you're not in the car, you know, it's like I don't know what the car's doing, you know, and and I'm sure you noticed that when you drove, you know, Washburn and DeLay's EP car. It's like the slip angles are. You can go so fast into corners. You can overdrive a corner on a Hoosier shod, you know, an A7 or you know, an Avon slick or a Hoosier slick. You can overdrive a corner, and it doesn't penalize you like it does a street tire. I mean, not even close. I mean, there's no comparison. So it's like you can, and I'm sure you don't notice that in the Sprint. I mean, you can go way too fast into a corner, and you're like, I can make it work, you know, because the tires will, you know, they're almost like your parachute for you. It's just like, you're really doing this wrong, but I can make this work.
Yeah, the scrubbing of speed in those doesn't seem as painful. Whereas I tell most people that are new, I'm like, if you're pushing into a turn and pushing off line, which is probably the big thing here, if you're pushing off line 4 or 5 feet, that's half a second. I was like, that's right. How you make up seconds on people that are several seconds faster than you. It's mostly you're pushing too hard in turns, which I have to now admit was the same exact thing I did in the GT3 this whole season, because my assumption was I could go faster in these turns than in the Civic. Not the case. The Civic actually does do some things better. But like you're saying, in that EP Civic, I was just blown away. I was like, wait, there's so much more grip. I just kept going. Wheel turning, acceleration. Yeah. I was like, wow, this seems easy and fun.
Yeah, and I noticed that, like, when I built my EP car, you know, it's like, until you actually, and no matter how fast I drove the car, I'm like, there's still more. I mean, the car was so far ahead of me as far as the braking, the grip, the, you know, acceleration. It's just like it was so far ahead of me. I mean, even the SMF car, like, again, I mean, I'm kind of going back to that because it's the most recent thing that I've really driven. It's just like it's way above me. The cornering is so much higher. I'm just not used to it. So, I mean, I think if anything, and granted, you know, I've been autocrossing for so many years, but it's like I really don't run that much anymore. So, you know, it's like my learning curve has kind of increased to the point where I'm kind of almost like a driver that doesn't have a lot of years behind his belt because I don't run much money anymore.
Well, like you mentioned, David Fouth, I've always looked at some of these people and I'm like, I hope I can get to the level where if I'm not out as much and I come back out, I still just have my core group of skills and I just apply those. Because Fouth comes out to usually like one practice, maybe two, and he shows up in CMOD at Nationals and he's competitive. I'm like, that's right, amazingly cool.
And that's one of those things where, I mean, you know, but even like, I'm sure John Thomas would be willing to admit at some point, he's like, you know, he runs 2 events a year, you know, but it's like, he knows, and I'm sure everyone else would know. And I mean, I think anyone would be foolish to say, it's like, I don't need the seat time. Everybody needs seat time. You know, IndyCar drivers do private tests for a reason.
Yeah, it only helps.
Right. You know, and I just, you know, but it's also, I also think it's kind of nice when you don't run a bunch, because when you get back into the car, you notice the finite driving differences, you know, from one car to the next. Like, you know, it's like when I could drive, you know, I could get in my SMF car and I could be fast, and then I could hop in Chad's S2000, you know, an STR, and I can be, even though the cornering speeds are completely different and everything else, it's like I can feel the differences in the car, you know. And that's one thing that, you know, conversely, Chad had a DSP Volkswagen GTI that he drove for years. So he was used to higher horsepower, limited slip, lots of grip, and then then he built this STR car. So he goes into corners, and I'll look at him like, Chad, we're going way too fast into this corner, and the car just pushes, I'm like, there's also a fine line, and that's one of those deals where when you left foot brake, if you go into a corner too fast, you can scrub the speed, but if you left foot brake and you're off the throttle, you're offline, and the run is done.
And for anybody struggling with that, it took me getting John Ames in the GT3. And I said, look, it just isn't turning here. He goes, you're just going way too fast. So he's got all this experience, plus he's driving an A Street or A stock Corvette. So it's actually kind of similar. Yes, it's not quite as fast, but the way he drives it, sometimes it's actually faster. So he knew kind of speeds that he thought we could do this little like pin turn. And he just told me, you're overdoing it. And I was just thinking I was doing something wrong, like not loading the nose by trail braking enough. He's like, no, you just overdid it. So it really took somebody else between James Yam explaining things of physics and weight of cars and somebody riding with me to go, no, you're asking too much of it. So evidently my feel for that car, I was overriding that with, no, it should do this. I have to change my technique to get it done. Wasn't the case.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've ridden with friends who've just gone into corners. I'm like, a legitimate, like in a prepared car, 40-mile-an-hour corner, and they go into it at 50. I'm like, oh, God, not good. I'm like, well, the corner workers are gonna be out here out in the marbles here because we're gonna be crop dusting soon. So
yeah, hitting stuff way outside.
Yeah, it's like, how did you hit that?
All right, so out of all these cars you've driven and owned, what's been a favorite or a couple of favorites?
I honestly think that my FSP Civic was a pretty amazing car for what it was able to do. It was so easy to drive at the limit. I would say that was probably one of my favorites. And then I think the SMF car, my Silver Civic, has been probably the most fun and yet the most aggravating car at the same time, which is probably what makes it, somewhat fun, because it doesn't do exactly what I thought it was going to do. And it's a little more, it's got a shorter fuse, so it doesn't respond the same way that that my FSP Civic does. And I think that honestly, like, driving the STR S2000, I from going back to a street tire thing, I still think that like Chad's S2000 is, I just have an absolute blast in it. It doesn't do the cornering speeds, it doesn't do the braking, it doesn't accelerate like a proper street mod or prepared car, but it's just a blast to drive. It's fun, it's easy, it's forgiving, but it's not slow. It's got good brakes. It's just, it's an interesting car to drive. I drove, I would say, probably the most demanding or difficult car I drove was Eric Stemler's Evo when we had it in street mod. He went absolutely ballistic on it. I mean, it made over 600 at the wheels, and it never lasted more than, I don't think we could keep it together more than an event without breaking something really big. But that car was breathtaking. I mean, the acceleration, it would spin the tires in third gear. It was so fast. I mean, he had, at the Oscoda Pro back in 2004, he had a 1.4 60-foot time.
Oh.
So, and it was actually over 60 feet. It was like 61 or 62 feet, but that car was so brutal in acceleration. I mean, but it broke parts that you never, he broke uprights. He broke drive shafts. He broke differentials. He broke rear end. It broke parts in like apocalyptic fashion. But when it held together for one or two runs, that car was just absolutely staggering how fast it was. We actually, Eric had bought some old Champ Car Brembo 8-piston calipers for the car. So it had Champ Car brakes on it, and the braking. I mean, we did a test at Grissom, and I got vertigo in it from running on the skid pad. The car. I mean, it was. I've never been in a car that was that breathtaking on a DOT radial car. I've never been anything that impressive. I've never been so scared and yet had so much fun, because I mean, it was just. Normally, in cars that I've driven, like an SSP Corvette as a passenger, you kind of get that feeling like in the back of your legs or the back of your calves when people are on the throttle. You kind of have that holy moly feeling. But Eric's Evo, I had that feeling, and I was driving it. It was just like, oh my, I am in way over my head. This car is just this car could kill us at any moment, But it had a 3-element rear wing and a huge front splitter, and just, Eric spared no expense on that car. He couldn't keep it together. I mean, he went obviously 11 tenths on everything, and it just, if we had just been able to detune it a little bit, that was the car that I finished third in ESP in 2004, 2005 and 2006. He, went ballistic on it. And then after that, ironically enough, he sold the car, and he, bought a GXP Pontiac Soul Sister and ran it in A Street, or A stock at the time, which was quite a change. Which, that was an interesting car, but to me, that car was very boring to drive. It was fast and everything else, and I'm like, But it's almost like once you've been in a car of the caliber before that, everything else is just boring.
Yeah, you weren't scared.
So it's like, yeah, it's fast and everything else, but I'm like, it's not trying to kill us. It's kind of boring.
I might not hit everything.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a personalized one, kind of for me and for you. If the EF Civic's allowed an FSP and you have unlimited budget, what car or a couple cars would you try? The EF for sure. I think the EF. Ironically enough, I don't think that the first gen CRX that's in FSP. That car was significantly faster than the EFs, in the heyday back in the early 2000s. So I mean, I honestly think that the EF does belong, and I will segment this by saying the EF Civic Si only. I still think that the CRX, if you look at it on paper, just from the fact that I think that it is a faster car in STS trim. So I don't, and I think you could get that car significantly lighter and street prepared. Well, maybe not. I think that the wheelbase would make enough of a difference in FSP that I think that the CRX would be too fast for FSP. But I think the Civic would be a phenomenal car. I mean, I think it would. But the kicker is to build a 10/10 FSP car. I mean, it's a lot of money. If you're going to do, to build the engine properly and everything else. I mean, I think it would be $15,000 to build that car right. So who wants to buy a Sprint? I should just jettison this thing now, because I don't want to go down that route.
Well, I'm trying to con Jeff Long into selling me one of his Civics. And the one offer, he goes, well, I'll sell it to you at X amount, but you got to bring shocks out. I'm like,
hey, you need to talk to me, because I have some Civics. I have.
It's closer too.
I have 2 cars that have won championships.
That's true.
See, I've got his old one. Although I'm tempted to see how this engine build or doesn't build goes. I may take that engine out and just put it in my car. That would have been the easy button. But when I dynoed the 2, his made like 5 horsepower or 6 less than mine did. So dynoed same day, same dyno 2 years ago. And I went and told Jeff, I'm like, your car's heavier. Now I don't remember the torque. I'll have to look at the torque curves. Now it wasn't that's Z-Dyne from Tim Smith based off, and then him having a newer block, and he said the head was all redone, but he made less power with a heavier car, like 100 pounds heavier. So that's the only reason that engine's not already in my car as of 4 or 5 months ago. Because I just hate to go, well, yes, it's free almost to put it in there, but I know it made less power than mine.
Yeah, and I think unless you're on an assembly line where you can actually build and duplicate every motor the exact same on a CNC mill, each engine's going to be different. I mean, I think, there are cylinder blocks that may flow a little bit differently, and conversely, I think going to street prepared with an EF, switching that intake manifold makes the biggest difference. I mean, it is shocking, the difference getting rid of that PGM FI intake manifold. Switching that over to a Skunk 2 or an Edelbrock, it is night and day difference. It'll easily pick up 10 horsepower.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you can get to FSP light by doing some of that stuff. The real money, probably, like you said, is probably individual throttle bodies and building the engine out to 40 over and such. Right.
But again, I don't think I would not run individual throttle bodies. I think that a proper plenum intake manifold with a large 62 millimeter throttle body with proper engine management. And I think the other thing, what I noticed, and I switched from my individual throttle bodies, is with the EFs, it's very difficult to get a proper air filter assembly or air filter behind it. So we ran the trumpets wide open, and after I think probably 5 or 6 events, we actually had to re-hone and re-ring it because the intakes, and I don't have pictures of it anymore, but the intake side of my cylinder walls looked like they were sandblasted from just the gravel and the dust and all of the crap that was floating around in the engine bay getting sucked into the individual throttle bodies. It actually washed the side of the cylinder walls down, where just the sand and the dirt from all the concrete events we were around. I mean, it just, it's like I noticed the car, it's like the compressions. I mean, the car felt like it was down on power. And we did a compression test, and it was okay. And then we did a leak down test, and it just blew through the rings. It was shocking. I mean, I'm like, oh my God. So we luckily I added another block that we put together, pulled the pistons out, and when we did that, we noticed that the rings were completely washed out and the cylinder walls were completely just junk. So to be able to put a proper intake tube and an intake manifold and a proper air filter on it, you'll get just as much horsepower out of a properly tuned intake manifold that actually is a lot better on partial throttle too. Individual throttle bodies only really work from 6 to 9. That's really, they're terrible mid throttle. So, and a lot of it could have been a tune at that point because we ran that Z-Dyne. The Hondata was better because you could actually tune off of throttle position sensor, whereas with the Z-Dyne you had to run off a map as well, and it's just tuning-wise it was difficult. But I think in an ideal world, a Japanese chassis or American chassis, I guess it really doesn't really matter. Although lightweight when you get to a OCD on that, I think a Japanese EF chassis with some 4-pound carbon seats and 40 over motor, and I still think that the 13, that's the catch-all, because if the courses continue to be at the same speed they are, the 13s, as fast as they are, you run out of gear.
Oh, good point. Yeah, that's where that's so
important.
With
the 425 final, now granted, they come out of corners incredibly well on a 13, but that second to third gear jump is big, and again, I'm still along the same lines. If the Street Prepared Advisory Committee ended up doing that, I think it should be single line. I don't think you should do the best of breed update backdate by an 88 Civic Standard.
Oh, come on now. Those are all Japanese.
Yeah, I know. And an 88 Standard with 2-mile-an-hour bumper beams that weigh like 30 pounds less.
Oh, yes. Okay, people don't listen to that part. That's what we want. Although I don't think I have one. I have a 90 or 91 2 shells sitting there that are newer. I better get on Craigslist.
Yeah, so we can delete this off of.
No, we'll let it go. I'm going to buy all the 88s up right now today before I release
the 88
this.
4-speed standards had the 2-mile-an-hour impact beams, so they were quite a bit lighter. Yeah, so which I was trying to find back in 2001, 2002, and I couldn't find any in Columbus because at that point in STS they allowed update backdate before the Franken Civic scared everybody. You know, somebody building. Well, Chris Shenefield built an '88 Civic shell that was going to come and destroy the whole class.
And is that a 4-speed manual, of course, or is it automatic?
It's a 4-speed manual car, yeah.
All righty. Something I don't have. I should put that on my cheap car list.
Look for terrible vinyl seats with an EP. It looks like an ET extraterrestrial headrest, and you found gold. So,
all right. I always look for 89s, and people, I buy some and just give them to other people or sell them to other people, just not trying to make money. Yeah. Now I know I should add just in case.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think dampers to personal choice. And depending on what, I think you could make either of those differentials work. You could either make a Quaife or an M Factory, or like I said, I haven't done enough homework to see if Geiken makes a D series. They did at one point. I don't know if they still do. I'm sure Lou Goddard probably, if he saw a market in it, he would pull out the build sheet and start building them again. But,
yeah, he's writing all the letters for yes. We should have those in STS. Everybody should have limited slips. Although my big thing not to is just the cost. Now I would love to have it, and I even have a Quaife. I would love to because when it's wet and I'm in a challenge in a pro, I would love to have that. Plus to be able to compete with the Miatas. I think that it's going to be something quicker. How much I don't know, but.
Well, and I think if anything, well, the interesting thing is it's like nobody's really kind of run away with it in the Miata anymore. So it's like it's difficult to say that I think you could equalize the ST from a wheel width standpoint, or allowing limited slips on some cars but not on others.
Yeah, because I think if you put it in the Civic, since the Miatas already have it, the Civics are going to gain something in CRXs.
Right. I mean, I think maybe you could make a plausible argument to make the Civics have 15x8, because that's not a hard wheel to fit on those cars. Even if you just did them in the front, to help, to try and equalize against the CRX. Because I still think that the CRX is probably, I think it's the slight edge winner 9 times out of 10. And I think the 10th time is probably going to be the Miata that's probably a little bit faster than the Civic, actually.
Yeah, and luckily because it's autocross and there's so many turns and places to make mistakes, it's been each of the last years, especially pro versus the finale or the normal nationals, it's been different each time. Like who wins the pro doesn't necessarily win nationals, and different cars have won each of those, I think, each time. So
right, and nobody's significantly run away with it.
Yeah, true. So, there's not been some big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like somebody covered everybody, because in 2001 I won by 0.3. Shenefield beat me, I think, by 0.2 in 2002, but I think third place was, I think 2002 was Nathan Whipple, and he was like 1.8 behind me. So, like, those days are done.
Yeah, I can't imagine that happening. Yeah. It would have to be a wet or something really weird. I just don't think any of us can pull off something that much different, whatever, with so many people trying to pull off the fastest run ever. So.
Right, and that was one of those deals where like I said, in 2001 was I think 0.3. I won by 0.3, and then Shenefield and I were like on top of each other, and then I think like I said, Nathan Whipple was I think at least over a second behind me, and then it was kind of but like I said, those days I don't, unless there's rain. National championships are won by tenths, hundreds, and thousands now, so the playing field has gotten so deep, and the development has gotten so. I mean, these are the best times in autocross, history that I think we've ever been in. As far as depth of talent and availability of aftermarket parts and tuning and everything else. These are great times that we're in. So.
Yeah, nice it's the heyday, and then we've got these people, which there probably were decades ago, but specializing in just these setups for us as much as anything.
Right. There were old school like Jim McCamey's. Phenomenal chassis builders. And Jim's still around, and he's a heck of a chassis builder. And
can you connect me to him, because I've tried to find contact info and I haven't found that yet. So anybody listening.
Yes. think Jim either probably still has a pager or maybe a flip phone now. Although he may have just gotten a Nextel. I'm not really sure. Jim's old school, but I can definitely try and get his contact information, because a couple Ohio Valley region people are friends with him, but we can make that happen.
And he probably has a great landline that has great service, very clear. So.
Yes.
So here's like a good wrap-up question. If you have unlimited budget, what would you build? And I guess I forgot, so I'm going to throw in two things. First of all, whose car, if anybody's you could drive today, what would you jump into? And then you have unlimited budget to build something. What are you playing with?
I would say Jeff Kiesel's car, but I don't think that car would actually be a fun car to drive. If I could drive Jeff Kiesel's car for a season, I think it'd be a fun car to drive. Jeff Kiesel's car would be phenomenal. I'd love to drive a B-Mod car, although I'm tall, fat, and way too little of talent. I'd love to drive a B-Mod car. But I think I'd say either Jeff Kiesel's car possibly, or it would be interesting to drive like Robert Thorne's, it's now SSM, but it would be interesting to drive his BSP CR, which is now his SSM car. It would be interesting to drive that car if you could kind of go back in time, hypothetically.
I've heard from several people that drove it that was perfect. Like taking it to what he did now, not so fun, but in the BSP trim, it was just like perfect. You probably didn't have enough power to get in trouble because you had so much grip.
Yeah, we built a car for Jared Rahal. I worked for the Rahals for years and years, but we built an S2000 for BSP, and in 2006, I co-drove with him a little bit, and that car was actually an absolute blast to drive. That really changed my view on. I mean, I was never against rear-wheel drive at all. I mean, I was just kind of always a front-wheel drive guy, but that really, I think, made me a much better driver, because the S2000s at the limit are, even on race tires, I mean, they are sketchy. Because the problem with those cars is they've got so much grip and they've got so much speed, but the problem is they're so twitchy because you're already full throttle. It's like you can't give it more throttle to fix what you're doing. It's like, well, I'm already mad at it, so I'm like, I can control the spin, or that's one of those catch-22s. But as far as a hypothetical, if money were no object, I would love to build two cars. I would love to build an E46 M3 with an M5 with a V8, with a 4-liter V8 in it for street mod. That would be an interesting car. And now I'm going to have to say 2 or 3 different cars. A car that I can't believe that nobody has actually built yet is one of the twins in street mod. I still can't believe that nobody's built a BRZ or an FRS for street mod. I think that car would be a very interesting car. But I think probably my most ideal car would probably be a Porsche 964 with a Porsche Motorsports 5-liter in it, and run 275 so you could get the weight brake for SSM, and build a short wheelbase, skinny SSM Porsche for SSM.
Where's the engine at in that car?
It's rear engine.
Okay.
So it is literally the opposite of what it would be completely out of my comfort zone, but yeah, I mean, it would be easily a $200,000 build, but it certainly would be cool.
Whoa!
Because it's
why is it $200,000? What does the engine versus the car cost, or the shell?
Well, the Porsche Motorsports motors, I think, are about $75,000. So, and if you're going there, you may as well do dry carbon. Carbon. You got to do the dry carbon fenders and the hood and the bumpers, and then you've got to go crazy on the aero and center lock wheels. And I mean, if you're going to go completely out of control, you may as well
do it right.
be on sports car
air jack.
every month.
Yeah, I mean, Tillett carbon seats, and you may as well just go completely insane on it. It would be fun. I mean, I don't know, but even with that kind of horsepower, I mean, I think that car is actually the 964 chassis, the old 911s, or that's basically, it's an air cooled car. I mean, those are actually pretty small. Like the GT3 that you drive, they're big.
Yes,
they're big girls. I mean, they are really big for what they are. It's rather shocking, actually. But I think an old air-cooled 911 with a crazy motorsport engine with a sequential, Quaife gearbox, I think it'd be pretty cool.
No kidding. That would fix, although I've not had any shifting problems lately, but being on a downshift, I am a little jealous of Scott Frazier being in the new GT3. Just, hey, okay, it'll go down if it wants to. Like, it knows we're racing, so, okay, it's a pin turn, go for it.
Yeah, and a lot of those cars, and have you replaced the motor mounts? Or what year is it, a 996 or 997?
It's a 2011.
Okay. Have you replaced the motor mounts in those?
I have no clue.
Yeah, because those cars are very sensitive to motor mounts.
I hear the limited slip goes out every year, so they just all accept that they're not working anymore.
Yeah, it's like, ugh.
Although it puts down, I can't notice that at all. It puts down power amazingly. What the ideal, from what I'm hearing from people, is you don't track them, and therefore you set them up where they actually rotate on lift. So that's where it's supposed to be like the Civic, which is not yet. It doesn't do that. It doesn't give you that nice rotation when you lift.
Yeah, I mean those cars are definitely sensitive to alignment settings.
Yeah, and they've got so much adjustment that it's way out of my range. I just keep asking these guys that have a clue, like, how does this look? How does that look? Because, evidently you can do a ton.
That's the crazy thing, is the cars come with coilovers. I mean, there's no specified rate on ride height. You can crush those cars and still technically be in stock. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, they say rake and everything. We've had people comment about the rake of the car, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what? We're supposed to know what? Yeah. And how much fuel should we run? Maybe full tank some people are doing. It's like,
The full tank definitely helps the front end on that car as far as steering input. So.
Now I'm gonna have. It was only half tank this last time, although it did seem better. But the thing that Tom Berry said that is so true, I've got to tell people: tire management. 2 events ago, or whatever, last of the summer season, the car was just crazy, kind of loose, like you had to feather the throttle, or the rear tires were done because it just runs through those, whereas the fronts just keep lasting and lasting and lasting.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing that you bring that up. That's one thing that I've noticed in all the years of driving. That if the car starts doing something different, look at your tires.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and I ironic. I must be getting senile in my old age. I mean, I started, the car started doing things mid-season a little bit different, and I've got several sets of tires, but they were all from the same build date. And they were, I realized that it's just like my tires are going off, And the problem with the Civics is now that everybody runs a stagger setup. Well, the rear tires were just, granted they only had maybe 50 runs on them, but it's just like they do life cycle out.
Yeah, they get hard. They dry out.
They get hard, Yeah, and it's just, the car started doing things a little bit differently, and I've got an adjustable rear wing on the car, and midway through the year, I actually had to put the gurney in it. I had to put the wicker in the car because the car was starting to get a little twitchy. And then I found the point where it's like the wing was at full angle of attack, and it's like the car was still. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm starting to back camber off. I'm like, what am I doing? It needs new tires. I put new tires on it. I was able to take all the stuff back off. I'm like, I need to pay attention to my setup sheet.
So what you're saying happened to me. So everybody out there, take notes. If you're front wheel drive and you think the rear tires are just okay, I started doubting myself in the Integra for about 2 months because I looked at the rear tires and they still had tread. But guess what? They were rock hard. And I just, being a goober, I put them on and take them off every time. I wasn't paying attention. And I started thinking, man, do I have to do this or do that? No, it was simply the rear tires were becoming rocks.
Well, we actually bought Chris Swearinger's old SSM Miata.
And please, I just brought this up. You added anti-lock brakes.
Yes, ABS. And we bought Swearinger's car, and my buddy Jimmy Rock bought it. But and when we got it, he said it had like 3 sets of tires and everything else. Well, we bought the trailer. We bought the whole package from Chris. Well, it sat out a winter and then a summer in Denver, Colorado. Those tires were harder than woodpecker's lips. Those tires had heat cycled. I mean, they were just cooked, and they were brand new tires. They were brand new A6s, but they actually had, and I'm sure you remember the Hoosier SO3s and 4s. They would get like that purple groove or the purple hue on them. These were brand new tires that actually had the purple on the side of the tires. They got so hot in the trailer.
Oh, they cycled themselves. They dried out and such.
They dried out in the trailer. You know, so obviously wherever, you know, the trailer was, it obviously got really hot, and then it got really cold. The Hoosier Radial wets that we had actually they were dry rotted and cracked around all of the tread blocks, and they were a year old.
Oh, and I learned from the people in the Northwest, you drive on a Hoosier wet and it's done. The next year it's useless. So I even knew people that wrapped them in saran wrap, and I watched them unwrap them. I said, "You already drove on those? They're useless." And he was blown away, pissed. I said, "But these Toyos I've had that I drive across the country on back in the day, on the Integra, they're still fresh a year and a half later, and they still work." Amazing.
Well, the interesting thing about that, and it's a tire management issue too. It's like if my car sits in my garage, you know, and it's out of the sun. The sun is the enemy on any tire. You know, like when I after the season's over, I'll clean the wheels and tires up. I'll actually drain. You know, I'll pull the air out of the tires, or you know, take the valve stems out, and I actually seal them in bags. Do like these packing bags that we get to ship stuff out, and you actually seal them. You know, the ambient air and cold temperatures are the enemy for any race tire.
Okay, I will go get my new Bridgestones out of the garage because I see snowflakes falling right now, and put them in the basement. Yeah. And I'll even put them in bags, maybe just trash bags. Yeah. But I'll start there.
Even if trash bags, if you can tie them up tight, it really does honestly help.
Helps keep that magic in there. Oh, so you mentioned Miata, that Miata. Yeah. I drove. Chris is like, "Get in this car," and this was even years ago. I actually said yes. I take off hauling butt, and I blow straight through the first brake turn zone. I said, "Dude, I can't slow down in your car." So he's like, "No, it's fine. You just have to learn not having anti-lock brakes." I'm like, "No, dude." I'm like, "Your car is so fast." I loved it. This is me claiming I was right. Well, I was only right because at Nationals, I was there when he got Eric Strelnex and Andy McKee in the car. And they both go, "Wow, we think this car can actually probably compete. But you have to have anti-lock brakes because you can't slow down." That thing was crazy.
Yeah, it was the first thing we did was we did the Willwood Dynalite, you know, caliper and piston assembly, and it made a huge difference on the car. So, I mean, well, it's not as fast as Eric Anderson's car. Eric's car is just it's in a league of its own. But you know, that car was pretty crazy. I mean, it was definitely kind of like the you know, the godfather, so to speak, of SSM Miatas. I mean, he was definitely a trailblazer in that regard.
Yeah, I could have seen myself driving. I just couldn't slow down. I'm like, this is ridiculous. You can go so fast. And we would look at TrackMate data back in the day, and he was blown away at how little time I spent braking. Like comparing lines of how much distance. And I swear, in that car, you're going so fast, he would have to start braking so much earlier. And that's where I'm harping on this for everybody. There's somebody locally with an E-Stock Miata that the anti-lock brakes were not working. And when I drove it, I'm like, no, you want this advantage if you can have it. I swear you do. It's just going to shorten your braking zone down, is the idea. David Fouth told me, when you use the brakes in the Integra Type R, make sure you're using them hard enough that you feel the anti-lock brakes. As in, really use them as quickly as possible when you need them.
Right. Because, yeah, the ABS system on the Integra Type R has actually got a pretty sophisticated, you know, braking algorithm. That car actually has pretty phenomenal ABS. And I think the Miata definitely has, you know, we've got several ABS units that we're going to put on that car. We don't know which one. There's several generations of the Mazda. There's a 2-channel, a 3-channel, and a 4-channel. We've got to figure out which one to put on the car. But that's the thing, Eric Anderson's car and most of the, because I don't think Neil Tofson's car doesn't have ABS, but KO's got it, and I know Billy Davis has it. I mean, and it's a huge difference. So I drove. KO owned it after he bought Raleigh and Velma had their CSP Miata. Danny KO bought that red Miata, and I drove that car, and it was phenomenal. But the brakes were they were god awful. They were just, you'd touch the brakes and you'd lock up the inside, the left front instantly. Which I'm like, man, this car would be amazing if you had ABS.
Yeah, so everybody out there, if you can have it and you're trying to be competitive, get it.
Yeah, so that's everybody thought that Tom Kubo painted his car green. I'm like, no, that's a different car. They switched from that blue car to the green one. They switched to a car that actually had the ABS system in it. The ABS system is actually kind of a pain to get out of the Miatas. I mean, you need all the brake lines and everything else. It's a nightmare.
Just switch instead of trying to dare take it out. Same thing with those MR2s back in the day.
Right, because I think, I don't know if it was Rick Gould or somebody did it, or maybe Chris, I don't remember. Somebody on the West Coast did the brake swap, and they said they'd never do it ever again. I think they had bought a wrecked car, and they were taking parts off of it back and forth, and on weekend 2 or weekend 3, it's like we'd be better off if we found a car and swapped all our parts off of our race car onto the new one, because it's such a nightmare.
Yeah, because you're basically dismantling 2 cars to put them back together anyway. So just move stuff off the race bits. Well, hey, thanks for all the time and all the info. It's been fun.
No, absolutely. It's definitely been a pleasure. I'm definitely a fan of the podcast. It's been a lot of fun listening to, people I know and people that I've known, just throughout the years, but not really personally known. It's kind of cool.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also, share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.